to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, also known as
Snake Bros.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. We gotta get some triangles in this cube. Triangles of science.
Yeah, you can
everything important is like fucking triangles. Why are we in a cube?
You can make triangles out of tangents.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Could make 2 triangles out of this cube.
All you need is two tangents out of the cube, and you'll have a triangle.
Right. Slice it in half diagonally from corner to corner. We'll have triangles. So,
okay, so one tangent.
Yeah, we can just, it's a tangent plane. So maybe multiple tangents, just kind of sit in the same area. So last show we talked about Kyle's kind of diving into the Book of Enoch. And that made me go get the actual PDF of the Book of Enoch that he was talking about. The one specifically that was translated by this guy, what was his name? Andy? McCracken.
I don't know what his name is.
Yeah, Andy McCracken. So I started to read it. I don't have a fancy...
I don't know if that's what it is.
That sounds right. I don't have a fancy, reader like Kyle does. My phone won't do that. But I actually just read it with my eyes. And
lame.
I know, it's so freaking 20th century. I got... part of the way through it, and then in his intros to each chapter or part of the book, he would say some stuff, and a lot of things he was saying was interesting, but then he just referenced this other book. He was like, so if you this is like this and this and this, and if you want to see what I'm talking about, go look at Ralph Ellis's book. And I was like, okay, and he had a link, so I just clicked on the link, bought the book on Kindle, and started reading that, which this guy goes just in depth on all these measurement systems, right? And like he talks about, he's like, okay, so Petrie is like looking at the Great Pyramid, and he comes up with what he calls a royal cubit.
Yeah.
Right. And then people are looking at Stonehenge or whatever, and they come up with
cubit.
Yeah. And people are looking at Stonehenge, and they come up with the megalithic yard, right? So, and these are, and I'm like, I've kind of wondered, like, how do you do this? Like, how do you look at a site and decide? This is the unit link that they were using, right? And he explains it really well. He's like, look, like, I think he used an example for a cargo bay for a particular kind of aircraft. He's like, if you looked at this with and it was an American aircraft. So he's like, if you looked at this and you're looking at it with meters or the metric system or wherever, you would get all these weird fractions. You would get these enormous decimals, and it wouldn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
But if you knew about the imperial system, you would suddenly see that the size of this compared to that is like it's 4,000 and 6,000. You'd be like, oh. Right, it's whole numbers and real easy. Right. So he says that like engineers prefer nice, neat whole numbers. They're all OCD. They don't want weird fractions all over the place. So like when they build something, it's going to be 4 by 3 by 2, or and so that he was like, this is what we do, and we're looking. So we look at the Great Pyramid. We're looking for like what
whole numbers.
What units can we use that like resolves all of these measurements into whole numbers and nice and clean?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's badass.
Yeah. So like he's like Petrie found what he called the royal cubit of Egypt, which is the 0.5.
No.
What?
When you say it, you have to say the royal cubit.
That's right. Dr. Petrie found the royal cubit of Egypt. Based on the Great Pyramid. And it's like 0.5321. It's really, really specific. It goes into it goes to like 5 or 6 decimal places of the meter. Right. And that resolves the height of the pyramid to 280, and the width, the circumference at 4 or something, or it's all real whole numbers.
Yeah.
But he goes from that. He's like, so look at all these other systems and all these other ancient sites, right? And he's like, he mainly is pointing at Avebury in England and Stonehenge and Giza. Those are the main sites he's looking at, because he's like, look, it's clearly a correlation here, right? He says Stonehenge is based on pi. I mean, it's fucking pi's everywhere. You look at it, it's pi. All the hinges are pi. That's what he said. And I was like, what? And then he shows like, okay, so what is pi? It's 22 over 7, right? Well, if you look at these hinges, the upright stones are 22 to the lintels 7.
Wow.
Every single one of them. He was like, those are pies. They are pi. And he's like, they're gates. And I was like, holy shit. So like how we've talked about how pi seems to come from somewhere else, right? And he's like, these are gates to the spirit realm. And I'm like, okay, they're kind of saying that pi is coming from, right? that pi is the gate to the spirit realm, right? This is how you build a sacred place, is you use this number because that's where it comes from. And like they would always represent it as the hinge, the 2 uprights and the 1 across. And he shows all these pictures.
Which is a lot like the symbol we use to represent it.
Yeah, and he shows, right. He says the Greeks knew, they took this symbol. Why did they use this particular symbol? Because that was the gate. They were just like pi. And also he points out that like the whole Greek alphabet is very old, but pi shows up kind of out of nowhere in the middle of everything, right? Like, well, a lot like Athena or Venus, right? Just appears in this already very old system. Like the Greeks just added pi. And it was, I can't remember who it was, if it was Aristotle or somebody, but one of the Greek, the guy who was credited with discovering it, okay, by modern, the standard model basically says this guy discovered pi. Well, it's not true. He went to Egypt, like most learned Greeks, and like got initiated into their mystery schools. Comes back with pi, like Pythagoras goes after 20 years of trying to, he's applying to every, like, come on, man, let me go into this mystery school. And they're like, no, you're not. You're Greek, Finally, he gets in after 20 years. He comes back and he like starts the Pythagorean system. Okay, Archimedes. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Show Observer. Archimedes is the one who modern.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have your window open, and he's already corrected you.
Yeah, he's corrected me.
0.523 to 0.525 meters.
Well, it's really exact. So.
Well, yeah, but there are disagreements. Okay, so the one guy came up with one number, and then other people came up with some different ones,
but a lot of people came up with the same number that he did. There are people that didn't, but they were looking at different sites.
Yeah, I think it was the 0.523.
Yeah, it's 0.523. Yeah. But anyway, those don't matter. The point, like, I would get it, because like these numbers are difficult to follow. But if you just realize that, like, if you take any ancient site and then you can find some unit that resolves the entire thing into whole numbers, that's probably what they were using, or some derivative of it. Right. And he shows how, so we know that pi is built into the pyramid by its height, right? So you take the entire length of its base, like measure side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4, and then treat that as a circle, as the circumference. Yeah. The radius of that, which you have to derive using pi, is the height. And that gives you the 52-degree angle of it, okay? So even though it's a square, the fact that they used pi to get the height turns it into a circle, technically, in math, in terms of math, right? So
it's the reverse of the squaring of the circle.
Yes, exactly. But because, okay, so when you're trying to do this in like with material, which comes in lumps, you can't actually completely do it totally correctly because, because you can't have something that's 14159 forever, right? Right. So they have to use 22/7. Okay, which still is a
not perfect.
Right, it's not perfect, but it isn't as.
It's the closest whole number fraction.
Right, exactly. It's the closest approximation we can get to whole numbers with this number, right? And it's not exactly right. If you work that out, it comes to like
Did I just say whole number fraction?
Whole number fractions.
A fraction using whole numbers.
Yeah, like post predicting the past fractional whole numbers. Post postulate.
But the cool thing about the Great Pyramid, it's the ratio from the circumference of the base to the height is like really close to pi, but not.
It's 22/7.
They could have gone more accurate.
Right.
But also, it has that ratio of the sides being, or the circumference being 1/54,320th of the circumference of the Earth.
Oh yeah, 43,200, yeah.
Sorry.
And people are like, well, that's some arbitrary number. No, it's not. It's processional.
Right. And so the height is also roughly 43,200th of the polar radius.
Okay? Yeah.
But because the Earth is spinning, it's kind of flattened out.
Right. It's an oblate spheroid. Yeah, that makes it fat in the middle.
Right. So it's not a perfect circle. So if you measured the circumference of the Earth at the equator,
it's larger than
then use pi to get the radius.
Yeah, you would do it for the circle, but it doesn't work.
It wouldn't give you the exact. It would be way off the polar radius,
right? Because the circle would be way above it. Yeah,
right. So that's why I think the cool thing about the Great Pyramid is that they went off from pi towards the direction that is more representative of the shorter vertical height, like the Earth has to the circle.
Yeah. And
in the radius.
And it's also weird that they were.
I'm not saying that very well, but you
No,
know.
I think you're like if you take the circle of the equator and you just like rotate it 90 degrees so that it would be on the poles, the top and bottom of the circle would be way above and below the top and bottom of the Earth. Because
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the bulge. Because
Right.
Of the
So the
spin.
radius doesn't work because it's actually squashed. Yeah.
Right, but the degree that the Great Pyramid is off of pi is squat. It's short. It's
Yeah.
shorter.
Yes.
So that it gets closer to matching the Earth.
Right. Because it's supposed to represent the northern hemisphere.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like wherever you look, like they'll be like, well, they got it really close, but it wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
And then they talk about pi. They're like, they got really close, but it wasn't. But it's
Yeah.
like, well, they were doing both.
Right. That's right.
So they had to like meet in the middle somewhere, basically.
Yeah.
I think that's badass.
And then, well, and then somehow they were able to do that and also have it to where you just take the measurement of, well, if you take half the circumference, that's the same distance that a point on the equator goes in 1 second from due to rotation.
Right.
Like how did you make all that work? I mean, maybe
Because they were already using geometry, like in the same,
Yeah.
360 degrees in a circle. They had already measured the Earth in the same way that we have measured it.
Yeah.
And
it's just
still
wild that like, okay, so like I'm thinking that like, so I could build a model right now that was, representational of the northern hemisphere of the Earth, but to also get these other things that pull it into time as well.
Right. So that's what I think is cool, is that like this number system that we still use today, like in geometry and in time, are numbers that were derived from the measurements of the Earth, geometry, and time.
Yeah.
They're the same sort of hexadecimal
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, well, it's obviously they included time into, like, they were, to them time was integral. Like you couldn't do, like they would put them into the metrology. That's what's fascinating to me.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's not just about measuring space, or you make the standard of the unit, both space and time.
Yeah,
like
that's freaking badass.
like the foot. It's like, okay, you get to get the foot, take the circumference of the Earth at the equator, divide it by the number of degrees in a circle times 1,000. And then you divide that by the exact number of days in the mean tropical year,
Yeah.
which is time there, right? So it's 365.14, whatever it is, and then you get 99.99999, which is like, that's how accurate it is to the foot, to whatever. Okay, what are you saying, Brett? Babylonian approximation is 25 over 8, but that number is irrational. 28 over 9 is the only approximation of pi that is not irrational that I know of without going to huge fractions. 25 over 8 is 3.125. Yeah, so 22 over 7 is the one that they use. It's the closest to actual pi.
No response.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Computer's
But
burned.
anyway,
he told his computer to divide 22 by 7, and it's like, it's on fire now.
I sidetracked you with the pyramid thing, but you were talking about how he was the guy doing the measurement system.
Yeah, so he's basically like the first thing he wants to show is that whoever built Stonehenge was also either in some way involved with the people building the pyramid. Okay, because he's like, look, the megalithic yard and the royal cubit are not the same lengths, but that doesn't matter because when you step back and look at what they were doing, you realize that they were doing the exact same thing. They were arriving at a system of measure for that site.
That's what I'm talking about, dude.
Yeah, it was based on ratios, like you said.
Yes.
But also he says based on like these ideas of. So he talks about there's, and I remember seeing this before, that there's like what they would say sacred measurement systems and then a profane measurement system, right? Implying that the sacred one is somehow more than just based on stuff here, right? So like the metric system would be a profane. Right, it's really good. It's like it's easy to use. Like all the numbers work out. You like if it's like 1.64 kilograms, you know exactly how many grams that is, and it's really easy because it's based on 10. But that's profane. It isn't based on the universe and all that shit. Right. I mean, it is loosely, but they get the meter, or they used to get the meter by taking the polar circumference of the Earth and dividing it by some relevant number. But they don't do that now. Now it's based on how far this light goes in some tiny fraction of a second.
Okay.
Which is ridiculous because then they turn around and use meters to measure the speed of light.
Right. So,
Round and around and around and around and around. So now nothing ever changes, and they're just like, we solved that problem.
yeah.
But so I'm trying to understand, like, so what does sacred mean in this context? Like, what does this mean? And he says I'm probably have to paraphrase him, but he was like, so sacred, from what I've divined so far, he's like, sacred, I think, means use this unit of measure to study these sites, to learn the secrets of the gods. That's what he said. He was like, this is what sacred means to me at this point. I haven't read the whole book, so I don't know if that's still his conclusion. But he's like, so, because he started doing this, because he's an engineer, right? He was an aircraft engineer or whatever in England, and he was like, what are they, who the fuck builds a Stonehenge? Which is basically what he was doing at the very beginning. He's like, what the fuck is this giant granite birthday cake? And he a prison far too easy to escape. Fucking badass song.
Yivis. Stonehenge, check it out.
Yeah, it's a great song. But he also looks at Avebury, which we haven't talked about that very much because but he's like, look, if you look at the inner construction, because Avebury is like a mound, right? It's the largest mountain known in the world. It's this enormous dome on one of those
grassy hills.
Yeah, those classic English, like everything's mowed and perfectly fucking, like every flower's in place and all that shit. Rolling lawns, and there's people having picnics, and there's this enormous dome of grass, but down around the base of it is this beautiful white stone that somebody has made enormous shitloads of Celtic spirals in. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's Avebury, and it's part of this. It's part of it. Like, so if you look at pictures from the sky, looking at this whole area, you realize that it's a big thing, but it's part of this enormous network of hinges. What do they call them? The cairns, the fucking the ditches. They would dig these circular,
trenches or whatever.
Yeah, and then they had the barrows, which are like, they also look like long mounds. They would call them long barrows or whatever. But if you dug all the dirt away, you end up with like, well, they would call, if it was here, they would call it glacial erratics, right? 4 or 5 rocks like this with an enormous one across the top of them. Yeah. But that whole thing would be covered in dirt for some reason, right? So like whoever was building it would stand up 4 or 5 big ass boulders and then take an enormous boulder and lay it across all those and then cover the whole thing in dirt to make a mound out of it. And they would call those barrows, because there would be some hollow part underneath. Yeah. But when you clean it all off, you're like, holy fuck, how do they do that? Like, I have some pictures of barrows that are they're just mind blowing. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm like, okay, this is like beyond impossible blocks, because they didn't cut anything. It's just gigantic rock, and they're like, let's put that one on top of that one and make them stay there with dirt. And you're like, okay, but. And they did this all over the countryside. So he shows pictures from the sky where he's like, so there's this circle, and like, here's Stonehenge. And he starts talking about the various different types of rocks and the sarsen stones. And he's like, so I didn't know this, but he says that whenever you're looking, and I should rephrase. I did know this part, but I did not know this particular detail about Stonehenge. He's like, so whenever I'm looking at a site, I look for the most meticulously dressed stones, because those are probably the most important area, because whoever, that's where they took the most time and really fucking made everything badass, right? Yeah. And so we can see this at the pyramid, obviously. Like, you look at the core blocks, they're rough dressed, and they made them right, but they're just rough. But if you look at any of the stuff near passageways or whatever, they're fucking perfectly smooth and they're polished and shine, So this kind of happened with Gantenbrink as he was going up, running his robot up that tunnel. The rocks were all rough and shit, but then suddenly they started to get smoother and better quality. And at the very end, you had this beautiful white Tura limestone, right, which indicated that there's some kind of chamber. So at Stonehenge, he's like, I can't remember what they were, but he shows this picture of these, and he's like, it's fallen over, and nobody knows what they were originally in. But the stones are just fucking beautiful, smooth curves. They're not all rough like we associate with Stonehenge. Mm-hmm. I mean, they look like. Hello there. They look like modern art, modern minimalist art, right? They're these beautiful, just like Spartan curves and everything. And like, it comes up to they're real thin and wide. And it's like I don't know how to describe it, but they're really sharply cut and just badass. And he's like, so this was the most important part. Somebody really took their time on this, right? Mm. And that's where he first noticed the 22 by 11 or by 7 relationship or whatever. But yeah, so he's showing all that, and he's like, so they had this system of measurement that they came up with for this site. But the entire, like, once you figure out the system of measurement and then you see what they were doing, and he was like, I had to go to, again, get in the sky to see it. Because like, once you go at the sky and look down at Stonehenge, you see that there's a whole bunch of shit you can't see from the ground. These enormous circles and these what they call the the holes where they had the wooden posts all around and shit. And then there's there's this huge circle that was it was a mound and then a ditch, right? There's an enormous circle. Stonehenge is like small in the middle, but then there's two other circles that are like touching the edge of this big circle. And he's like, well, what are those? You can't even see those from the ground, you know? Anyway, I haven't finished the book, so I don't know all the answers to those questions. I don't even know if he goes into it. But what he's basically pointing out is the way that the people that built Stonehenge arrived at their system of measurement is the same way that the engineers who built the Great Pyramid and the other big pyramids at Giza arrived at their systems of measurement to build those things. Right? Because he says, well, once you figure out what it is and you start trying to backwards engineer it to figure out, well, why did they use this particular measurement? Then you see that the method that they arrived at it is the same, right?
Yeah.
They were doing the same thing. And so then he starts saying, okay, so what, like, are these the same people?
Yeah.
Like whoever built the Giza pyramids also like came over to England and built Stonehenge?
So, remember, I've talked about this before. I need to go back and review this, but what's his name? Geology guy.
Randall
Carlson talked about like the way they would build these sacred sites. Like they'd first go put a staff up and then trace the shadow throughout the day. And then they would, they would pick a specific day, probably like the equinox or the solstice or something like that. And they would trace that shadow. And then from the line that they traced, when I say they traced the shadow, like they traced the tip of the shadow throughout the day.
Yeah.
As it
moves,
as the sun moves by or whatever. And then from that drawing they get on the ground, they would derive a ratio or some measurement system and then they would use that to build the site at that spot, and the staff represents like the cornerstone or something.
And it's the hitching post of the sun, and it's based on it's based on where they are on the globe and shit too.
Exactly. Because the line that you trace in the sand is going to have, or in the dirt or whatever, is going to have, it's going to be
peculiar to that latitude.
Yes, exactly, to that area, and then exactly to that day in that year in that processional part of the whole processional cycle and everything.
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't think it would have anything to do with procession, actually, because the
sun doesn't precess, right?
No, but the equinox changes.
Yeah.
It's the same position in the sky though.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would change the time of year. So no, it wouldn't.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
It wouldn't have anything to do with
it. Wouldn't change the shape you get on the ground, but you would have to
That's right.
adjust.
It'd be a different time of year, or different season.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought this was fascinating. And again, it's kind of like what you were doing.
Same season. Dang it. I'm wrong again. Same season, different month.
Right. Same season, different month.
Eventually, we're going to have summer in December, people.
Right. And that's, if you go to Australia, you get that right now.
Due to procession. So that's what I'm getting confused about right now.
Right.
But yeah, so whatever day of the year you'd pick, like you would have a specific pattern, and then whatever position on the globe you were in, that pattern would be that way. So if you went miles and miles in a different direction to build another site, that shadow is going to have a different pattern on the ground.
Yeah.
And so you could derive some ratios or whatever from the drawing on the ground, and then come up with a system of measurement for that site. So I'm wondering if if it's something that they're using to get their...
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, like that would be the base. That'd be one of the first things you do when you start, just so that you're like getting an exact, precise, like, where am I? Right? Where is this spot?
Right.
If you're butt flapping them, like assuming that they can only do things with shadows.
Well, yeah, but still, like, that's one of the best ways to do it. Like if you
don't have a really complicated GPS satellite system, like because we could do that.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we could determine. I mean, we maybe not get some of the specifics you would get with the shadow, the analemma or whatever you get that figure 8. But like wherever I am, I can get really precise coordinates and then derive all that shit from those.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to run a program for it.
Yeah, to use Stellarium, it's free. So this is really
But
cool.
yeah, that's like what we were just talking about, how the pyramid, the four sides of the pyramid sort of are not exactly square. They're skewed because they're in the northern hemisphere, and they actually match the skewed sort of parallelogram.
Yes.
that 1 second of arc
Yeah.
or what
On the quarter of a
grid-
second or whatever it is.
Yeah, on the grid.
Yeah. Because it gets smaller as you go north.
It's yeah, you're right.
1/4 of a second, right? You get the minute.
I think it's half.
I thought it was the second is divided into 4 pieces and it's 1/4. Maybe you're
Because
right.
if you take 2 sides of it, you get 1 second of arc.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's
But that's still it's a division of 4, right? Because if you have 1 second and you divide it into 4 pieces, then one of like going like that and that still gives you the entire length of one direction of the. It's hard to say. It's hard to describe. Like I could show
But
you
if
I
you
was drawing
take
it.
so if you take 2 sides of it and you get that length of 2 sides,
And you straighten them out.
right, you get 1 second of arc.
Yes. So if you fold that back in half, then you can make 4 blocks to that size.
Right, but each one's a half a second. Each side is a
Yes,
half a
yeah,
second.
yeah, yeah.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, each side of the block is half a second.
Yeah. Each side of the base of the pyramid is 1/2 second of
Okay.
arc.
Yeah. What was I saying? It was. Oh, okay.
Quarter.
I'm saying it was a quarter of the square that you get.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. You're right. And so was I.
We're both right. And that's why we're wrong. Okay. Shit.
Sorry about that, folks.
That's all right. Stop arguing with me, damn it.
This is what happens on Snake Bros.
Yeah. We fucking argue with each other because we're both right. God damn it. Look, I'm right too. I know. Okay. That always happens because like it turns out we're looking at it completely differently. I'm like, dude, it's a square. You divide it.
Really was that like that would be a good way to like using that the shadow idea. You could get something that would, when you expanded it or blew it up, you could get dimensions that were match that area of the globe in terms of the size. So when you drew a grid on the globe, the pyramid would like fit right into that grid.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was saying that it was fitting into that grid. They had to divide the square into 4. That's all I was trying to say. That's what I thought. I was like, wait, yeah, if you take that line, you cut it in half. Anyway.
So just fast forward that part that just happened, folks. To this
We'll
point.
we'll provide skip notes in the show notes. Like you may want to skip from blah 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 seconds to the.
While we have an argument to figure out that we were both right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. No one is ever wrong on this fucking on this podcast, guys.
Except almost all of us.
Except we're always wrong. Okay. So the other thing that he goes into is like why are we still using pieces of a measurement system that was designed specifically for these sites, for this, right? And one of the things he points out is he's like, look, so this measurement system must have had patrons throughout history that were powerful people that kept it because they were like, no, we want to keep using this. This is sacred shit. And you can see it if you just recently you can look at people like, why aren't they using the metric system? This is dumb.
Yeah.
But somebody's always like, no, we're going to keep using the metric system, or we're going to keep using the imperial system because it has patrons. It has people that understand, like people like Randall Carlson.
Yeah.
Or people that are, and the guy points out, he's like, so the United States uses it. One of the reasons that is given for us not switching over to the metric system is because like science started in Europe, but we like in the United States, we made enormous measurement, we gathered shitloads of data and all of it's in imperial. And people are like, dude, I don't want to go back and change all that shit to fucking metric. Like we still have the world's repository of like basic scientific measurements of all this fucking shit because Americans were just measuring everything, right? And he's like, so they say, well, we don't want to change all that stuff, so we stay with imperial. But I mean, it could be changed. We have computers; they could do it easy. So somebody doesn't want to change to metric because they understand based on this very ancient, very sacred that is somehow connected with ancient Egypt, or at least connected with the Great Pyramids. That ancient Egypt may have built their civilization off the knowledge they found in the Great Pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, so we have Masons all over the United States was started by Masons. Most of the founding fathers were Masons, and that's where you would find people that understand this system, like Randall Carlson, right? Like who's like a big advocate of this, like sacred geometry. He understands all this shit. He's definitely not in favor of going from the imperial to the metric, right?
Yeah.
But so I've got this part right here. He says, other notables for sort of keeping the imperial system around. Other notables include Mr. Charles Piazzi Smith and Sir John Herschel. Both were eminent astronomers. Both were passionately in favor of the imperial measurement system, which was apparently due to some form of Egyptian provenance. Even today, one author in a similar topic states, quote, "The system of measurement that is by far to be preferred is that which counts in feet and inches rather than in meters. Indeed, adepts in sacred geometry and metrology tend to regard the meter as nothing more than a fashionable folly." I was like,
Take that, Felix.
fuck off, metrics. He also
If
points,
you're listening.
He also Felix. Yeah, that's why, Felix. That's why. He also points out that like it's embedded in our culture in all kinds of hidden ways that most people don't realize. Like we kind of touched on the cards, right? So cards, but he's like, yeah. So number of cards, 52, which is the number of weeks in the year. Number of cards per suit, 13, which is the number of lunar months. Number of picture cards, which is 12, which is the number of months in a year. Number of suits, 4 seasons. Number of spots, which is total number of cards, 364, which is the number of days per year. To the last item, the Joker was added, and its value is said to be 1.234, which gives you 365.234 days per year.
0.234.
1234 is the value of the Joker, 1.234.
Whoa, dude.
And when you add that to the 364 of the cards, you get 365.234, which is exactly the right number of days in the year for the mean solar year.
Yeah.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cards.
Yeah. So it's in the card. You're like, okay, so wait.
It's in the cards, folks.
This is why people get addicted to card games. It's this. I've always wondered this. Like, what is the like? Okay, gambling is, you know, I understand games of chance and like the potential of like I could make it big this next one, right? But there's got to be more than that. There's some deep magic here, right?
Yeah.
Where people get stuck on this shit, and it's because the cards are based on sacred geometry.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
This is what happened to us with the game. Like, we didn't know it, but all those dice we were using are fucking sacred shapes.
Yeah, they're platonic solids.
Right, we're like, okay, everything's based on these, even the people we make. You have nothing, you have no say except for their name. And we're like, we roll, and then like we start, these characters became tulpas. Like they started to form tulpas in our minds where they're like talking to you, and you're like, I didn't think that, you know. Anyway, I just thought that was cool, and I'm going to keep reading the book because the dude's fascinating, and he keeps referencing. I guess he got a whole series. Like this is the first one in a whole series of investigations of all this stuff. So,
Oh yeah. See, folks, it's all because of me. Started reading Enoch, just got the whole thing going. It's the way it always happens.
that's right. I've been reading the Book of Enoch, written by Enoch.
All right, we're gonna take a snake break.
Yeah, we're gonna take a quick
Hi,
break.
one.
I bet snakes are sacred shapes.
They're just one.
Yeah, one and a triangle.
Kill that AC. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent podcast. Second half of the first hour, high atop the Edwards Plateau. Not broadcasting live, but recording. Ever recording.
I think I'm going to be able to get us on Spotify, which
Amazing conversations between sounds.
kind of still not live, but being broadcast in a way. Right, Spotify.
Limitless conversations between two limited individuals. I'm not done with my
I'm sorry.
shtick here, buddy.
Sorry, I can't tell.
I know. I'm playing. I really was
Keep
done.
going. Keep it going. Shadows. I haven't heard you do that in a long time. The shadows stuff. Shadows in the clay.
Man, just, you want to get something going, like you want to get a Snake Bros conversation going, just read the Book of Enoch.
That's true.
It just
Yeah.
makes shit happen.
Yeah, the bigoted old shaman.
He was just a bigoted old shaman.
I hope you guys all enjoyed the show notes from the last. I had a lot of fun writing that shit. The whole description of a book. That was a lot of fun to write.
All right, so you got any more on this numerology measurement?
Yeah,
something
okay.
metrology thingers?
Yeah, I do. Let me pull this up real quick here.
I'll just say that I'm like the imperial system. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
I always mess it up with like empirical, imperial.
Yeah, it's the Imperial
system.
Yeah.
Like, I know I've told you listeners to do this, but look up Randall Carlson.
Yeah.
And he's got a series of videos that you can actually buy. We haven't done that. We should do that. But he has like sort of they're like previews of each DVD.
Yeah.
I think there's 8 of them. And each one's like 15 minutes long or whatever.
Right. They're fantastic.
And it's him giving presentations in front of a class, and it's just mind blowing, like all of it.
Yeah.
And he just goes through these numbers and like the measurement systems. He goes through old, like the whole language of symbolism.
Yeah.
So he'll show you some painting, like this really ancient painting or whatever of Jesus Christ or something like that, and it's got all this stuff in it, and he just goes through and just like this symbol, this symbol, this symbol, this symbol, this symbol, and just tells you what it all means, like all the various different, meanings of the various symbols, and then like so that it shows you can read the painting, like a book. It's so freaking awesome, dude.
Crammed full of very specific information for people who can read it.
And so he'll show you how like one symbol has all these multiple meanings, but when it's combined with this other one, which has all these multiple meanings, like you put it in context and it says this.
It down, It's
just freaking awesome.
I've known that for a long time. Like I knew, because you could look at these reliefs or these carvings, and you're like, okay, they're saying something here,
right?
There's because all this weird shit's happening. I was like looking at a big Where's Waldo thing. Like all these people are all doing stuff, right? And there are all these little bitty stories in there, but Where's Waldo doesn't. You can't back away and be like, okay, this is telling. Well, I guess it is kind of telling you a story of Waldo. He's lost, right? But with these enormous or with these paintings or even just like etchings, you'd see them. You're like, okay, something more is going on here. There's like a 2-headed dragon, and the guy's standing on the dragon, and he's got a fucking fork that has 3 tines, and it's up, and it's like poking the moon, and like you know that there's all this shit happening. You're like, okay, what? Somebody is talking here.
But that was like when I was in Italy, and we went to that cathedral in Orvieto. Like the whole front wall of the building was just completely covered. There were like 4 main reliefs that were just filled with characters of people and all these things, and it was in high relief, and it was like marble.
Wow.
It just was mind-blowing how intricately detailed it was, and the doors were like these huge, massive doors. The freaking God could walk through those doors. Okay,
God like doors,
huge doors,
hammered bronze.
And they were hammered with like a square hammer. You can see all the hammer hits of this big square, like perfectly square.
Hammerhead,
like sharp edge square hammerhead. But using that hammerhead, they just like pounded out these badass like images in this door. It's just full of them,
Yeah. What are you gonna do today? I want to draw. Bang, ding, bang, ding, bang, bang.
God, what are you drawing? I'm seriously like, when I had to leave, when they told me I had to go, like I literally teared up because like I was walking through the interior, and the entire interior was just carved in high relief, everything, everywhere.
Yeah,
it was insane.
Your story of the nave with the 2 fucking glowing.
The windows, the windows on the outside, you couldn't tell that they were windows. It was stone. It didn't look like windows, but they had the arrow slits, but it was like
murder holes.
It was full of stone, right? And so I was like, that's really weird. They didn't, but you go inside, and they were like thin cut crystal, like straight from the rock. Like it had all the veins of the crystal inside, and so when you went in, the sun was just shining and lighting up those crystals,
and it would refract it.
Oh my God, it was so freaking mind blowing.
Yeah.
And there were these huge, like round stained glass windows in this one dome, like little thing that went off to the side, and there was like this whole structure built inside of it, and when you were standing on the inside, the sunlight's coming through these 2 round windows, and it looked like a skull,
a giant
massive
skull with
glowing eyes, and the whole thing, the frame of the thing, I don't know what they call it, that
it's like a nave, isn't that it?
It's something
a vestibule
that they put all of the sacred stuff inside of or whatever, but the way it was carved, it looked like the teeth in the front, and I was just like, oh man.
Never.
I have some pictures, not very good pictures.
I wonder if we could look that cathedral up and find good pictures of it.
Probably.
Yeah, because I want to see that. When you described that, I was like, holy fuck.
I've got great pictures of the front, but I was just using my phone, and I found out later that I didn't have it on the highest resolution setting. Epic fail. But I've got some good pictures of the front of it, and this is the kind of stuff that like Randall Carlson will like take you through these things and just show you what all this stuff means. And I'm like looking at the 4 reliefs on the front, and I'm like, they're telling like pretty much the entire story of the apocryphal texts.
Yeah.
Like in this, or at least the Torah.
Yeah. I remember you saying that. Yeah, you could see the whole progression. So did it have one of those quadruply recessed doors? You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like the door is got these steps coming out from it.
Yeah, it's like, well, I have to look at the pictures again, but it's like there's a big arch, and then there's another arch and another arch.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
something like that.
It kind of looks like, and they get bigger as it.
Oh, dude, and so it would come out, and then it would be round.
Yeah.
Right. There's like this round bulging part of and then it's inlaid with like gold and all this stuff, and it's like you could walk up to it, and the closer you get to it, you get right up to it, and you can see the tiny details of the inlaid like little curls and things.
Yeah.
It was just insane.
Yeah. And you're like, 2 guys built this.
I know. It blew me away. I was just like, we don't build anything like this.
Right.
Ever.
And actually Randall Carlson talks about that he calls it it was the high medieval, it's a high Middle Ages, right? It happened in the medieval period, but they had they had this period of warmth where it was like warmer than it is now, but they had more CO2.
Medieval warm period.
The medieval warm period, and so it was like 400 or 500 years that were incredibly prosperous. Like people were getting sometimes 2 bumper crops per season. They get they would fully flower and they'd harvest it.
Global warming, it just
they plant more and harvest it again twice a year.
Loving it.
So everything was warm. It was easy. There was abundant food. There was no strife, and suddenly, there it is. That's what I meant. Like they kind of step out.
Yes.
Yeah. So suddenly, he says that out of nowhere. Okay. So before that, you had the fall of Rome. Okay, and then all the way up to the medieval warm period, which is sometime just after, or maybe it's around 1000 AD. Okay. So before that, Rome had fallen, and there was like 400 or 500 years of just what they actually call the Dark Ages, right? And they call them the Dark Ages for a reason, because there's multiple reports during this period where the record keepers of the time would say that the sun just didn't come up for days at a time. Right. This is why they call it the Dark Ages, because there were multiple periods where like we haven't seen the sun in 3 days, right? And it's like pitch black. It's like nighttime. Anyway. They lost almost everything of their technology, they fell from Rome, which was pretty high tech. They had, Rome was very advanced, and then it went down to like nothing. Like they couldn't even build castles properly anymore. Like you look at the building of this period, it's just, they just didn't have shit. Blacksmithing was almost completely lost, And then all of a sudden they get the medieval warm period, and then just out of the woodwork shows like all these people that apparently know how to build these intricate, beautiful cathedrals.
And nobody knows how they
right. And there's like Randall Carlson's pointing out, like, okay, so the stained glass they did, like no one knows how they made this glass. It has the refractive properties that have never been duplicated and are not understood today. Like it's deeply refractive. So like when you're on the inside looking at them, like if you look at modern stained glass, you can tell that what you're looking at is colored glass with the sun on the other side of it, right? He says that these medieval, during the high Middle Ages, the stained glass that they put in these things, the refraction was so high that they appeared to be glowing of themselves.
Right.
Like it didn't look like the sun was behind them shining through. It looked like they themselves were glowing.
That's what this. Okay, so in the front of the cathedral, there's this huge single circular window, and it's the only window in the front.
Okay.
And it's way up high, and you can see it in the picture.
Oh yeah.
It's massive, dude. I mean,
right. It's divided into a million. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you go inside, that thing is literally lighting the whole building.
Yeah. It's like.
It's just, and when you turn around, I mean, like I'm like looking forward in the building. I'm like, wow, going through there. And then when I finally get to the back of it, I turn around and I'm just like, oh man, that thing is just.
And you recognize that if you zoom in on that, that's the fucking the goddamn daisy watch that they were wearing in Sumer. Like that's what that is.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Right. That's the imperial symbol of Japan. It's the same shape, that whatever that is. I don't know what they call it. It's a flower.
And so on the outside of the building, there's the black and white stone. And it looks like like a jail shirt or something.
Yeah.
And you can see this way down. The whole town is built on a hill, so you're the whole time you're traveling towards it, you're going uphill.
Yeah.
And it's just towering behind you. You can't really see what's going on, but you see like little slits between the narrow alleyways of this like black and white going up. You're like, what is that?
What is that?
And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the cathedral. And I'm like, what?
Why?
That looks so weird.
Yeah.
I get up to it, and it's just monstrous. And I'm like, oh my God. I get up close to it, and the black and white it's not painted.
Right. It
It is the stone
Yeah. It's like
that makes the color.
it's like andesite and something else.
And the whole street is paved in with all these patterns and stars and all this stuff. Like the whole, it's literally mind blowing. Like it just totally blew my mind. And I standing in the building before we left, I was just thinking like, who
did
this? And whoever they were, like it was like they just decided like we're going to take all of the knowledge that we have accumulated of mankind, and put it,
Cram it
write
into
it
construction.
write it in a book,
Yeah.
as a building.
Yes. That's right.
It was just
because that translates across the ages. Like there's no words.
yeah.
Right, but anyone can go and look at this. Any human, I guess you would say, can go and look at this and resonate with the imagery, with the, with the shape. This is why it's sacred. It talks to you on a level beyond language. Maybe this is the language of the birds.
Yeah.
The symbolism or whatever. But so this guy. Okay, so Ralph Ellis talks about this. He's like, these people were communicating with these structures. And he's like, I can't, he basically says, like, I don't know if this was the main point, but it seems like it's the main point. That the architects of these structures that he's studied, the architects of these things were, as their primary function, because you're right, when you're going to build something, the first thing you look at when you're going to design it is what does it need to do? Because everything else comes from that, right? If it doesn't need to do, withstand tidal waves, then you don't build it to withstand tidal waves, right? If it doesn't need, you don't waste time doing hard shit to have the building do stuff that isn't necessary, right? So there's the saying, form follows function, right? Which is true in this case. The form of the building follows the function that the building needs to serve.
Yeah.
Okay, so form follows
It
function.
needs to blow people's minds.
Right. So when you look at these, this is one of the reasons why so many of these structures are so mysterious to us now. And this, modern scholars try to poo-poo this, like, like everybody it's just the easiest way to build a large structure is to throw, toss stones into a pyramid. But people are asking questions like, why are they using these enormous weights of stones? Like why not small? Why did they go 500 miles away to get this particular kind of stone for this one part? Like what? And then move them in enormous chunks. Like, because since we all think, wow, that's badass. Holy shit. Yeah. Since we all think form follows function, then we must then say, like, this gigantic 400-ton piece of granite that came from 500 miles away has a function, or is necessary to some function. And then your question is, well, what the fuck is it doing? Like, what is the function if that's necessary? Because there's no correlation to anything we can think of now. Like what, Sitchin was like, well, they used these huge blocks because that could hold up the rocket or withstand the blast, and various people have come up with, Christopher Dunn and said, well, the only thing we build that's comparable in size and scope of this are power plants, right? So maybe this is a power plant, and you try to look at it in that context. But our power plants don't have like all this weird math puzzles built into them, as far as I know. Like, I've looked at the Hoover Dam, which does have a, they're like, well, Hoover Dam's like, it's processionally aligned. And I'm like, okay, well, they built an area where there's a sort of a particular section that shows you the processional alignment, but the dam itself has no fucking alignments. It's just going across the fucking river, the canyon. And it has no sacred measurements. It isn't 440 fucking cubits across and 220 down or whatever. The dam is doing its function, which is stopping the fucking water from moving through that canyon, right? Holding it back and letting it through in little trickles that run through lots of turbines to make power. That's what the dam does. It doesn't have any of that shit in it because it doesn't need any of that stuff to do what it needs to do, right? Yeah. So the question that we then ask of these, and that Ralph Ellis is asking, is like, so they built these things where they took enormous effort to not only like use these particular kind of fucking materials that came from very large distances, and some of them were very difficult to manage, like these enormous sheets of mica, like real thin, huge sheets of mica that they were putting underneath Teotihuacan.
Yeah,
like that's not only difficult, that's like hard to manage. Those sheets are fragile.
Yeah,
So, but they're transporting them from
Yeah, that's why I think like so much of that stuff is, especially because you can't see them, so you know the function.
Right. The function is based on the material, right? Yeah.
It's not for aesthetics or whatever.
Right. So he also is basically saying like these numbers and the way this whole thing sort of unfolds like this mathematical flower, right? It's like a fractal flower of math. He's like, this is part of the function, or is indicative of the function, because this is you can't do this by accident, right? We can just get rid of that whole idea, like, oh, it's coincidence that it has pi built into it. No, I'm sorry, no, right? Maybe you could say that if it only just had pi built into it, but it also has phi, and then they're also built into it at every possible level. Like this, like the length of this plus the diagonal of that is like phi times 4, and and it starts from the bottom. You can go times 2, times 3, times 4, and then you come back down. It's pi divided by 2, pi divided by 3, divided by 4. That's not an accident. You can't. And then the fact that it also is correlating to all this shit with the Earth, and then all that stuff with precession, and then there's the speed of light in there.
Especially when you have so many of these other sites and around the world that have the same type of correlations.
Right, but they think that's all bullshit too. Those sites don't have those correlations, and neither does this site, so you're making false correlations. But what I'm saying is like, fuck those guys. The correlations are real, and it isn't a coincidence. And so the question becomes, what is the function that arrives at this form? And that's the question that to me really is the question about that. Like, yeah, obviously, Russ, everybody wants to know what the fuck the pyramid was for if it wasn't a tomb. But I'm like, this really drills down into that question and shows you what it really is asking. Like, this is why we're asking this question. Because there's all this fucking shit built into the pyramid that we can see, and it's based on math that requires understanding of very complicated math, in some cases very simple math, but the kind of simple math that's simple after you know it, right?
Yeah, the fundamental stuff.
Yes. So there's all this universe shit. Like, how do they know all that? There's sizes of the Earth stuff. How do they fucking know that? There's very precise measurements of things that they shouldn't, like precise measurements at the speed of light, right? By the way, the metric system, right?
The golden ratio is represented in the Great Pyramid too. It's
right, like so the King's Chamber. If you're going, there's one way you can do it where you get the pi ratio.
Yeah.
And like you do this and you do that, and like it's like pi divided by 2, pi divided by 3, pi divided by 4.
Yeah, I think the golden ratio one is like if you measure the diagonal from floor to ceiling.
Yeah, and then you get something
measure
else.
The base.
Yeah, it's like that. You get pi.
On the short
phi.
end, you get phi. Yeah.
Right, and that one is like phi times 2, phi times 3.
But I think the golden ratio is also in the external, like the large structure. Like I can't remember what it is. I think it has to do with
well, I know that the Pythagorean
a vertical line to half of the base or something like that.
The Pythagorean 2, 3, 4 triangle is built into it.
Or 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5. 2, yeah, it's like if you take the pyramid and then you just cut it in half, like one side of it or whatever, you get this right triangle.
Oh, I remember what it is. It's if you measure all the way down to the subterranean chamber from the top.
Yeah.
Where the base of the Great Pyramid is, that dividing line where the base is to the top, that's the ratio.
Right. That's right. And then you can do that with the other chambers and you get the various divisions of it.
Yeah.
You do that from the subterranean chamber to the bottom of the Queen's chamber, you get this, and then you can do it to the King's chamber, you get that one. It's like times 2, times 4, times 5,
Yeah.
So that stuff is like, and again, so if we're like, okay, form follows function. Well, what the fuck is this function? Like, we're looking at the form, and like the more we understand about the form, the more mysterious the function becomes. Because you're like, what? This isn't a game, right? People don't play games with 14-acre structures. Like, that's not a fucking game. This is a lot of resources and a lot of effort to build.
That's why I love I can't remember who had this reasoning, but they pointed out, like, the largest structures that we build today that take all these resources and, from the community, the civilization.
They all know that they're going to get something from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are power plants right now. Right. Those are the biggest things. The nuclear power plants are hydroelectric dams.
Right. Only
because
fools
it takes
complain.
All of these resources to build it. And the reason why everybody is willing to do that and willing to give their services, their time, and work so hard and spend all that money is because they know what they're going to get back is going to be way greater.
Almost everybody.
Than the sum of its parts.
There's the few fools out in front of you going, no nukes, no Those guys are dumbasses.
we're not talking about that.
Don't worry about that. Most
So
people
yeah,
are like, yes.
I think that's really great reasoning about the pyramid. It's like they try to say, oh, some megalomaniac.
Right. It's built for the king. No.
Yeah, I think that they knew they were going to get something great out of it, and so what is that they got?
Right. And to me, just like, I don't know, I do this with other mysteries. Like, I look at it and I'm like, I want to peel it apart and really identify all the little mysteries that are involved in this whole mystery, right? Like, this is mysterious, this part's mysterious, this part's mysterious, this is also mysterious, the stuff that kind of gets brushed over, like, so that you can kind of hold the entire thing in your mind. Well, attempt to. You can't really do that with the Great Pyramid because there's so many mysteries in it.
Yeah.
But if you sit there with all of it, you're like, all of these things are question marks. All of them.
Yeah.
And once again, you go back to form follows function. So, like, we don't know what any of this is for. Right? I don't know what you're saying with that, bro. I'm not sure what you're saying with that. But, I mean, what are you talking Nazis here? Talking about Nazis?
No.
I know. I'm joking.
What's the name of that symbol? It looks like the swastika, but it's backwards. It's older.
Yeah. It's a Hindu.
Hindu, yeah.
I can't remember right now. But
Brett's obsessed with that one right now.
yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, the point is that, like, they went to enormous material, like, effort to do this. And it's not just the Giza pyramid. Like, the second pyramid, the Khafre one, has all of its own mysteries.
Yeah.
That are very strange. And like, and this guy is pointing out, like, so this one kind of, I can't remember what it was, but he's pointing out that it's not pi that they're using. It was something else. Some other fundamental number that they're sort of using on that one. And then he's like, in the Bid pyramid, like, the story on that was like, well, they were building it and they were like, well, this is really going to be too tall. So they kind of changed the angle. And he's like, no, if you look at the math, the same thing happens, that you realize they did this on purpose. It was meant to do this from the start. Nobody made a mistake and got halfway through and they were like, sorry, Pharaoh, we're going to kind of like tilt it down a bit, because it'll fall.
Yeah.
That's not what happened, right? And then there's the other pyramids, like the one at Mayun. Right? If you look at that now, it's like a weird, it's a ring of rubble around this weird square thing.
Yeah.
And you realize that there was a mud brick pyramid that they had built around this much older, very strange, fucking heterogeneous, dry leg rock cut structure. Doesn't look like a pyramid at all. It's some kind of tower, right? Or maybe think of a Babylonian style ziggurat, but very tall, like steep, right? And it has 7 layers, right?
And it's the same thing with some of the Central American pyramids. Like, they're actually older structures that
underneath, all this outer layer, the cladding, right?
Yeah.
And like you see this at Giza, it looks like there was multiple eras of people coming and covering it because it was made. I always assumed that they were benign, but these people were doing this because they're trying to preserve it, right? It's very, 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 very fucking old, and they find it in the desert and they're like, holy shit, it's just like eroded like crazy. And they're like, okay, once they realize what it is, we gotta save it. So they come in and they clad everything. They coat it with a layer of their best fucking stonework.
Yeah.
And then thousands of years later, somebody else finds it and they're like, holy shit. And then they coat it again. This is why you get all these various styles. Some of them which look like the Peruvian. They use the base of the pyramid of what is it? The M one. I can never say it. Menakure or whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah, the third pyramid.
Oh, Menkaure.
Menkaure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Around the base of that pyramid, its fucking casing stones are like heterogeneous, dry-laid, weird, soft granite, right? With knobs and shit. Looks just like the Peruvian blocks.
Yeah.
It looks like nothing else in Egypt. It looks like the weird soft stone technique that they used in Peru.
Yeah.
And that's the fucking casing blocks for this pyramid. And you're like, okay, who did that? So it looks like multiple cultures came by and saw this place, and they were like, this is the place of the gods, and they tried to preserve it, right? They would coat it in something. So,
or it was like, different engineering companies coming by, like, all right, we gotta.
Yeah, they're like, well, okay, we need somebody call up the engineering company and get them out here to repair it.
Yeah, let's try this other one. They're doing some pretty good stuff down in Peru.
Let's try Softstone Peru engineering corps. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're, I can't answer the function question, but it seems to me that the function has to do with some resource gathering, energy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I agree that it has to be, for it to be culturally, well, okay, for it to be like something where everybody in the culture is accepting this enormous expenditure of resources, it's got to be something like a power plant of some kind, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily like you can turn on your light bulbs with it,
Right.
but something's
I'm not
happening.
saying that. Yeah.
But okay, so then when you do what Velikovsky did and you look at all the myths and legends, all the myths and legends attach it directly to the spirit realm. They're like, this is how they got eternal life, or this is how the pharaoh went to the house of millions of years, or whatever, right? This is how they projected themselves to the stars, and
Yeah, so that's like part of the
Quant
reason.
stuffed.
Part of the reason for my like this thing, this analogy that I've been trying to stick with for a while. Like anything,
planets are gods.
yeah, gods are things in the sky, like in space.
Yeah.
Right? So the whole myth of this is where men become gods, or the pyramid was a way to transfer the pharaoh to a star, or to
Yeah.
whatever. It's like somehow related to going to space.
Right.
In other words, like,
Did the pharaoh really turn into a ghost and go up into the space and become a god? No. They were flesh and blood extraterrestrials.
but
yeah.
Okay, so if like using that analogy, if you go to space, you become a god,
Right.
because to be in space is that would be the definition of God.
Yeah. You can see
Like-
everything,
You're
and you may live forever. Yeah.
Well, it's just like, it's like, say, so one of the other examples I would use is like, let's say there was a group, like they were aliens, right?
Yeah.
And they show up and they're like their name for themselves is gods
Okay.
instead of humans.
Yeah.
Like we would say, hey, we're my name's George and I'm human.
Yeah.
And they're like, my name's Nepha and I'm a god.
All right, God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like you have this myth of like, oh,
So you're
the
saying
gods-
that the idea of God became quant stuffed over time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But so, like, this other analogy is that God is just something that's in space, right? So the stars are gods, the sun is a god, the comet, comet is a god,
Yeah,
all that stuff. Asteroids that come down are gods that came down from heaven,
Right. The fallen.
right? Fallen gods.
Yeah.
It's
And if you combine that with animism or something that says that most things are conscious in some way, then you can see easily how that there becomes agency to these things too, not
Yeah.
just that they're material, not a rock that's coming down by chance, but there's some kind of agency everywhere.
right, but just
Yeah.
breaking it down to like something really base, simple like that, like to what we would call an astronaut. A guy going into space becomes an astronaut.
Yeah.
They would say a guy going into space becomes a god.
Right.
Because their
Lowercase g,
name
but
for
still.
their name for a thing going into space, into the heavens, is God.
yeah.
And anything that's up there already is a god.
Right.
It's like we don't have a single name for something that's in space. We have named them all, and they're all different. Like this is a comet. That's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
star.
You mean like if it's an astronomical body,
Right.
Is what you're looking for.
Yes. And even a person that goes up there becomes an astronomical body.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but their word for it was just God. That's what I'm talking about. So like,
So you could like.
you
okay.
just like make your brain have that analogy all the time, and then whenever you're reading some ancient texts,
So you're like, I'm going to God. And that means you're going to space.
right.
Yeah. I got it. And can you
Yeah.
conjugate? How do you conjugate this word?
So it's like when they say like these structures is where men became gods or whatever. It's like, well, that's
It's a house of God. Like, what, it's a house of
right.
God.
That's a house of something that came from space.
Right.
or-
Shit. Build it with meteors. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I knew what you were doing, but I guess that explanation is a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, so it's like whenever I'm going to read an ancient text, like I'll try to just like keep that anytime they say
Turn the
anything
word
like,
God into from space.
Exactly.
Okay. Of space. God means of space. Yeah. This is the house of space.
That's right. Which really just makes you think like, okay, like and the reason why I did that was because I was thinking about these like where men become gods, and
Yeah.
the whole thing about how the pharaoh becomes a star or whatever is like a quant stuffed
Yeah.
thing about like how you got to space.
Right.
So it
it's-
would be the ancient astronauts idea, I guess.
Yeah, that's That, like, it's a satisfactory, in a way, it's a satisfactory answer, but it still
it's
doesn't.
not the full
Like, how does
answer.
the pyramid put you in space? Like,
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if it was a power plant for like getting something into space,
Yeah.
somehow. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Christopher Dunn is basically pointing out that the only way his power plant idea works is if they had orbiting satellites that could pick up the first, right? Because
Yeah.
the way he has it is the microwaves come down one of the shaft of the King's and they bounce off of something and go through all that hydrogen and come out massively amplified, but they're going out the other shaft, which is pointing out into space at the other
Right.
star. So so I don't know. It seems to me like you don't need all those correlations, those mathematical correlations, and all this sacred shit just to make a little power. Maybe that's because I don't understand what they were doing, how they were generating the power. He suggests that like the reason it's all Earth-based is because that's what makes it resonate, because it needs to resonate with the Earth.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, I agree with that.
But dude, like in Ralph Ellis's book, he's pointing out that he said this is one of the most genius things he's seen in any building that he's ever seen. So like if you look at the pyramid really closely, the layers, each layer is like starts out with these big rocks that are like taller than people, right? They're over 6 feet height. But as you go up in layers, and they're in 11s, they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it starts big and gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
And he says that's to stop it from resonating, to keep it dampens the fucking resonations that it would have in it all the time if it was just that would come from the Earth. It's such a huge structure; it would just constantly be quivering.
yeah.
And if there was an earthquake, it would just fucking fly apart. But he's like, so they did this to dampen the fucking. I'm like, all right, so they're dampening the resonance here.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. You know, so maybe that's just on a different level than what they were trying to get. I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, everywhere you turn in this, you're like, okay, maybe they wanted to ring with the Earth, but no, that they were dampening that same. You know, what the fuck? There are baffles built in to dampen that shit.
Yeah, I'm not saying that analogy is the answer either. Like I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just fun to think about that stuff because so many of the like the Greek myths and all that stuff, they're talking about planets.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're talking about bodies in space. Like
Right. You could take the story that they tell you about Mars going crazy and killing people, and you say, wait, this is telling a real story about some astronomical phenomenon.
right.
Yeah.
So I think that in so many ways, and it may not be like the idea that it's connected to some of these structures that are built, like these myths, right, that are connected to real structures, like the place where men became gods and all that kind of stuff. That could also be, quant stuff, right? From however many different civilizations found them and worked on them and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm just saying that when you're reading these myths, like that analogy works for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, like, anybody who looks at this stuff honestly sees that there's technology here that we're not getting, that we don't, that there's some kind of lost something here that was technological in nature, and maybe it was magic, but that's still a technology. I would consider magic to be a technology, like an understanding of some natural thing.
Forces.
Yeah.
You can manipulate.
Manipulation of forces using brain or mind, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's still, in a way, it would be if we had rules for magic, you could engineer with it, right?
Yeah.
If you understood the system. Anyway, the point is that
You can write spells.
yeah, you can spell. Yeah.
But we got to take another break.
Oh yeah, we do. But seriously, man, what I'm trying to say is like pyramids are spaceships, and we should just like turn them on and see where they take us.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're stargates. That's what the pie things are. You walk through the gate at the right time inside the pyramid, and I don't know. Maybe you have to have a cat. You probably have to have a cat with
The
you.
moon is a spaceship.
The moon is a spaceship.
So is the Earth. We're all traveling through space right now.
The Earth rolls. Spaceballs.
Study in the labs.
And with half our pyramid side behind our backs just to make it square. And somehow I need to add pie into this. I'm not trying to do it yet. Just to make it square.
Everyone can have pie.
That's right. The cake is a pie.
Pie for everyone.
Cake is a pie. You know, I was thinking about like, how would you describe a metaphor to somebody? Like, well, it's a metaphor. It's like a wait. I don't know what to do there.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I've been having these random thoughts, and I'm like, you know what? I should remember these sometimes and just pose them as questions on the show. Like, what, you know, because sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're like, okay. One thing I like to do is I like to collect things that I like. I like to collect what I call nerd test jokes, right? Like where you like, okay, this is a joke where you tell it in front of a shitload of people, and like whoever laughs is a fucking total nerd. Most people won't laugh because they'll be like, whoa. Right? So like one of the nerd test jokes is like, you know, an infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. Right? And the first one's like, I'll take a beer. And the second one's like, I'll take half a beer. And the next one's like, I'll take a quarter. And the bartender's like, God, it's going to take forever, and puts 2 beers down. Right?
Yeah.
Whoever laughs is a fucking nerd. That's a nerd test joke, you know. But there's this other one that I came across recently. I was like, okay, this is a great nerd test joke. It goes like this. We don't take too kindly to faster than light neutrinos around here, said the bartender. A neutrino walks into a bar.
I don't get it.
It's faster than light. So you see it come in after it already was in there. The bartender tells the neutrino.
Okay. Okay, I get it.
It walking, you know,
So
it's a walking into a bar joke. It's supposed to start with somebody walks into a bar. That happens at the end because it's faster than light. You see that after it's already happened.
Yeah. Oh, I feel dumb.
I was like, Kyle will get this. No, shit.
Damn it.
But dude, when I first heard it, I was like, it was like it was a delayed reaction. I'm thinking like, wait, you know, it's like straight up nerd joke. But ending with that was like weird. But I don't know. I think it's great.
Yeah, the other one that I know is there are 10 types of people in this world. Those who understand binary and those who don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. 10 in binary is 2. That's a great nerd joke, actually.
Yeah.
I'll have to add that to the collection. Now I have 11 nerd jokes. 3.
That's badass.
Okay. All right. So we've been going on the sacred geometry, and like I know I brought this up before, but we talked about Randall Carlson and stuff, and he's said in some if any of you guys go and watch, and I'll try to include links to some of these YouTube videos in the show notes, but if you go and watch some of them, like there's some where he mentions that why he's doing this. Like, so why is he up there in front of these big audiences or sometimes small audiences or just putting out DVDs where he's basically telling everybody all this secret shit, you know, like here's what all these symbols mean, and he's basically telling anybody who wants to come and learn, he will, and they, you know, they're basically they're putting it out there, and he's like, because the book is open. And this is a question I've been I would love to ask him, like, okay, first of all, like, how do you know that? Like, what is it that tells you the book is open? Like, you know, is it Aquarius? Because Aquarius is the water bringer is supposed to be
the bringer of knowledge.
The pouring out of the water from the jug is symbolizing a pouring out of information, right? And he brings the knowledge. So is the book open because we are now in the age of Aquarius? Is that why? Like, why is the book open? And when did this happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because he points out, he's showing you all these, in one particular video, I remember he's showing you all these imagery, like, you know, these carvings on cathedrals and shit, and there'll be guys, and I'm sure people you've seen this, like, think of Christian context, he's standing there, he looks like a priest or whatever, he's got the robe on, he's holding a globe in one hand and a book in the other, and the book is closed, right? And Randall Carlson put this out, see, the book is closed. During this period, these secrets were kept.
Yeah.
But, you know, the book being there is like, we have these, right? But then he shows you like more modern ones, and the book is open. It's like they're holding the same book, but it's open with the pages facing out. Like in other words, now the information is free to all. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so what? How did that? You know, what happened? What was the demarcation between book is closed to book is open, and what is? You know what I mean? I think this is a fascinating thing. Like, who decided this? Like, what system is this?
So I'm thinking about like the coming of Christ, right, and like the New Testament, or whatever,
the New Covenant,
So like there's a new set of rules coming, and like something changed there, and like the whole idea of the parables, where he starts telling the masses this esoteric knowledge. It's still hidden, but he's passing it out. To the masses. So like the book being open doesn't mean that you understand it, but it's being given. So like all of the.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then what I think is happening is not happening then, because I took the book being open to mean that like now we're giving out how to understand the parables in the deep sense. And Randall Carlson is telling you what these symbols mean.
Yeah, Randall Carlson is for sure.
That's what I mean. Like he's like, I'm doing this because the book is open. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And it's only been open for a short time. It hasn't been open for very long. Like he's showing you like 15th century carvings with the book closed. Like that, it hasn't been open for very long. You know what I mean? Like it's. This is why it fascinates me. I'm like, well, what changed to make it open, and who?
What system has been put in place that's got a long enough view to where it's like we're going to keep knowledge for this long, and
right? How do they know that you need to do it? That's what I'm saying. Like, that fascinated me when I was like, wait, what? You mean there was like a predetermined time that the book would open, and we all knew that this was the time we could start shouting this out from the, because that's what he says. Like we shout it from the hilltops.
Yeah, so that's part of the idea of like the cycle of catastrophe that he talks about.
Yeah.
So like, you know, the same thing was being quote unquote prophesied, like in the time of Christ, where they're saying like, oh, the destruction is coming, the end of the world, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But it's not in that age, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe maybe this is the Dark Ages. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one minor one or something.
Yeah.
But so what I'm thinking is that there's this whole prophecy of the destruction of the world, and so it's like there's been the keepers of knowledge because they understand this cycle, like what Randall Carlson is saying about the cycles of catastrophe. They've got it kind of mapped out based on like the precessional clock, and so they hide it, they keep it, preserve it, right, up to a point, and then they open it up, and
like before it's going to happen again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know.
To make it new news right before it happens, so sort of like try to facilitate people doing shit about it, rather than like if everybody knew this ancient legend and no one would pay any attention to the,
Maybe.
Yeah. That's, okay, that could be, it's sort of, I don't know. I just want to be like, okay, well, who opened the book? Who said, who told you, how did you know?
And how did the painter who painted this painting know the book was open now?
Yeah. Like,
are there the guy that commissioned it was like, okay, and the book needs to be open.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, like you look at all these. I mean, you know, you can dive into like Da Vinci paintings or any of these the Renaissance masters, and like they had symbolism all through their. I mean, just like the way people were holding their fingers, in particular, you know, and like and all of it means something. Now, I've drawn pictures with lots of people in them, and yes, like when you're drawing a person, there's a reason why every part of their body is doing something or other, right? But I could draw big scenes with lots of people in it. Like there was no cosmic symbology in there, you know. Like, in other words, what I'm saying is like the easiest way to draw pictures of lots of people is not to put shitloads of cosmic symbology in everything. Like stacking up blocks into a pyramid is the easiest way to do it. Like, I don't know. And then it's fascinating to me that those are the ones that become timeless, right? Like is it like Michelangelo's stuff, Da Vinci's shit, you know, all these famous artists, the reason their stuff is timeless is because it contains all this sacred shit in it.
That was kind of that's what I thought. And that's why I've like, you know, I'm thinking that's what I want to do with my music, right? I want to start
Yeah.
trying to do this, because if that's what makes it timeless, that it actually does contain some of these, some of this, whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it other than just like this ancient wisdom, like this stuff that's been passed down through the ages in this esoteric way.
Yeah.
Is that what makes it attractive, or is that what makes it last? That's kind of the question. And
Well, I think part of it is because they're also being commissioned by the largest institutions at the time, so they have almost unlimited resources to do whatever it is,
Yeah.
It's like he's painting the Sistine Chapel and the
Right,
ceiling.
right.
Like, that's a big project. Like,
Yeah.
it's enormous. But he has all the time and paint and whatever he wants in the world because it's the church, right? So you have that you have this big patron, I guess. But that also limits him. Now he has to sort of couch everything in this religious context.
right,
But he manages to put the same cosmic symbols all throughout using their images, right? He's like, okay, so here's God, here's Adam, and,
Yeah.
like you look at all Da Vinci's paintings are like that. It's all fucking Bible stuff. But every single one of them is telling you non-Bible stuff, like all kinds of non-Bible stuff.
So I basically look at the Bible in the same way, like that. A whole,
Yeah.
The Torah
Yeah.
is like, and the New Testament is like pretty much a work of like esoteric knowledge being
Yeah.
couched in this whole,
Yeah.
sort of like personified story.
No, I'm sorry. I was just thinking of another.
So what I'm saying is that the fact that Michelangelo sort of quote unquote couched his painting in this religious sense was still following the method,
Yeah.
like, because that's where it came from to begin with.
Right,
It's
he's-
like
yeah.
the method was to make this story in this way.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, you're saying that he was carrying on the esoteric tradition of sort of putting it behind other stuff. The exoteric story is not what the information is.
That's not what
Yeah.
So it could be that there was this story, and then somebody who was translating it came along and like put all this hidden stuff.
Yeah, people
inside.
suggested that too.
I don't think that's what it was.
No, 'cause, I think the information exists in the old non-translated shit too.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's been sort of a process of translating the same myths, from way back to the Sumerians,
Yeah.
over and over into different languages, and so that the overall story stays the same. The esoteric stuff is still hidden in there.
Yeah.
But it's like the people change,
Yeah.
their names can change and whatever, but
Names are changed to protect the innocent. I was thinking like if the church or if God was like a modern sort of tech giant company, that the Bible would be one of those like ULA, like the fucking user agreement things. It's like this enormous amount of text, and you just like scroll to the bottom and go, I agree. Just click agree. Yeah, well, I'll read that shit. I agree. It's like it's one of those fucking. You look at it, you're like, holy shit, like that's crazy fucking long. Just scroll to the bottom. I agree. Let's get on with it. Give me the powers. Come on. Let me use that software. I'm not going to read that user agreement bullshit.
okay, so I have like sort of an answer to your first question. A simile is like a metaphor, and a metaphor is a simile. How about that?
That's good. That's good.
But anyway,
I just like the idea of like, well, it's a metaphor. It's like, wait. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So, I mean, that's pretty much, as far as the sacred geometry stuff goes, that's what I've been looking into for the past couple of weeks. And I'm going to continue to read this book. I'm right in the middle of it, and it's like really getting good now, because he's like, okay, so here we've looked at all these sites, we've got all this information, now we understand that something profound is going on here, like, and that people have been protecting these systems throughout the ages. Like, there have been patrons of the very wealthy, powerful. Oh look, Ty's calling me.
You son of a dooski.
But I'm pro. Sounds off. Can't tell. Anyway, like he talks about, I can't remember the dude's name, but he's like, so we wouldn't even have Stonehenge. Stonehenge would not exist because at some point they started to take it apart. They were quarrying it. Right. This kind of blows my mind. Like who does that? Who looks at these beautiful rings of stones and like, I'll go use that to build my hut, and starts breaking it down. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I know.
So he says that there's a guy, I can't remember the dude's name, but he's a fucking hero, whoever he was, Lord something or other. He's in the aristocracy, like managed to he found out that they were tearing these sites apart, that they were just ripping up, pulling the stones out of the ground and pouring them and shit. And he manages to like go in there and purchased most of the fucking area, right? And then after doing that and stopping them from tearing the place apart, he went into Parliament and pushed this bill passed that stopped people from being able to do that, period, all over the country. He's like, don't destroy this. This is our heritage,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so there's one guy who was like a fucking blue blood 1%er that was badass, right? That guy was badass, because these were peasants. Basically, if you look at it, these were the 99%. They were just going to destroy their fucking history to build whatever they were doing with the rocks. Like, yeah, this is easy to get. And like you see this all like the pyramids. They've been used as quarries until they became too dangerous. Like the reason the second pyramid has all those cladding stones at the top is because they mined it until it got up there, and then like it was too dangerous after that because you're way up there, and if it starts to come down, you're a dead man. It's just gonna, so they stopped doing
God,
it.
that's freaking terrible, dude.
Yeah, but if you go into Cairo, you can find
supposedly like I've heard the whole idea that like the casing stones on the Great Pyramid were all carved with all this.
Yeah,
stuff.
there were symbols all over it. Yeah.
But I mean, that would be weird because there are no symbols anywhere else.
Why so I take that to mean that whoever did that was not the person who built the pyramid.
Yeah.
Like the cladding stuff, I take that as this is casing that was done later. Way later. I mean, you could see it, in the Sphinx temple. It's cased in granite that was obviously put in way after the core blocks that were pulled out of the Sphinx enclosure were put down because they're heavily eroded.
Right.
So somebody really long time ago built the initial structures. And I just was reading, I was on Graham Hancock's forum site, and this dude had posted this humongous thread of all this. He's like, okay, so here's another look at the Sphinx. And he has lots of very, very good information that points to the idea that the Sphinx initially was actually a structure, it wasn't a statue. He's like, look, there's these weird tunnels in it, first of all. Like there's a tunnel in the back that if you go into it, it goes, and they know about this, it goes all the way up to and then there's like, it goes down and there's potentially warrens of tunnels down underneath there. He's like, what were these for? They're, and he's like, but if you look at some of this, anyway, I can't remember all the evidence, but he shows you that like, it's very possible that the Sphinx was actually a boxy building, that they had rock cut out of this protrusion. Okay. And then he had a reason for the enclosure being dug, and when they did the surveys, they found that it was weird. Like Shock talks about this, how they found that the floor of one part of it's much older than the floor of another part. You know what I'm talking about? Like they were looking at the erosion of rock going down into it and how deep it goes, and like over here it's like 3 meters deep, and over here it's only 1, implying that these two
they were at different levels or whatever.
Yeah, that this other part that's only 1 meter deep was exposed far later than this other one. It's had a lot more time to sort of degrade the rock from the surface. Well, this guy was like, well, if the Nile actually came all the way up to the pyramids, like there's a lot of people that think that in the fringe idea, they're like, so a long time ago, the Nile was right here. That's what all these fucking causeways and shit are for. There were docks, right? They talk about like, so there's a pyramid and there's this road coming off of it. But the road doesn't actually go to anything. It doesn't go to the entrance, and some of them are really at odd angles. And but they'll end at what they call the mortuary temple of whoever the fuck they think built it, right? Because there's this big structure there. Well, if the Nile came really close to the plateau, like up to the edge of the plateau, then those were docks, and this was fucking pathways to move materials, and So he was like, so if the Nile was right here, at the edge of the plateau, then you have to look at, okay, so what's going on? So you move all this fucking water and you change everything, and suddenly you've got greenery all over the place here. Okay, and it's easy you've got a highway coming right past.
Right.
But it also floods every fucking year. The Nile swells enormously. So he goes through all this shit and he shows you like the Sphinx was probably a building. You know, that was a rock cut structure because there was it's made out of a piece of limestone that sort of stuck up above all the plateau. And he's like, so they cut this into a classic rock cut type of building, but because it was like just eroded, it's right next to the water, and so it's submerged every fucking year. And it may have been intended to do that on some, because he's like, this connects to some stuff underneath the Great Pyramid. It may have been part of this whole system of whatever it was doing.
Yeah.
Drawing water in some kind of siphon, whatever. But like once the Nile moved, you know, after some cataclysmic thing, maybe during the Exodus, whatever happened during that shit where the Nile moves miles and miles away and, you know, and leaves the site high and dry. But then what was this boxy sort of building that was this is now just kind of this rounded lump that nobody really remembers what it was, right? And it kind of vaguely looks like a cat or maybe a dog. So somebody eventually stacks blocks up on one end and kind of carves that into a head of a dog or a cat. And then somebody later on finds it and carves that into a head of a person because it's now buried in sand. And I'm like, okay, that's really fascinating. Like that makes sense because if you look at the body of the Sphinx, it doesn't look like it was, I don't know. It looks different from the head, like drastically different in terms of color, texture, type of stone, and then you could see, to me, it looks like, you know, the Colossi of Memnon in Egypt, those enormous,
two big, massive statues.
Yeah, they kind of look like they're floating on a lake because they're out there in the water's really shallow. So that whole area floods, and so if you look at it, it looks like there's this huge lake and there's these giant colossi floating on the surface of it. It's badass.
I haven't seen it in the flood.
Oh, really? Because it's weird because okay, nobody's recorded this, but everybody says that one of them starts to hum when the water's there. Like they say all through that landscape you can hear it. Like there's this weird, and they're a crystalline stone of some kind, or whatever. Anyway,
but the way they look like they're stacked up rocks or whatever. It looks a lot like the Sphinx head.
Yeah, it looks like stacked blocks, and then somebody carved it into the shape that they wanted. That's what the Sphinx head looks like. Right at the neckline, you can see that it completely changes into this other. Because the rest of the Sphinx is not stacked rock. It's
actually the actual
right. But people are like, well, it looks like it because of the layers. I'm like, no. Like, okay, yes, there's layers there, but it doesn't look like layers of blocks.
Right.
You know, not to me anyway. I don't know. I live around limestone, so I'm like, that's blocks. That's not. Even though they both have layers, right? I don't know. That made a lot of sense to me, and it was really interesting. Like. Everything does change if you put the Nile right there. Yeah. I mean, like, just the whole Orion correlation. The Nile is supposed to match the Milky Way in the sky, and if it's right there running along the plateau, you're like, oh, okay. Now I can see how this works. You can stand at this one spot, and you look down, and you see the three pyramids, and the fucking water's right here. And you just go up to the sky, and the Milky Way's right there, and the three fucking stars of Orion are right here, and you're like, holy shit, that's bam.
So that's where the correlation was on the ancient river?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the location of the ancient Nile, yeah. Which, that's what places it at, whatever, 10,500 BC or something like that. But you rotate everything around where that all matches up on the equinox or something.
Yeah, that's badass.
But, okay, so if we don't, like, arbitrarily butt-flap the Egyptians... You know, because this is the other thing I find disturbing about this, even this sort of fringe astronomical looks, because, you know, the astronomical dating of archaeological sites is still, I mean, it's more mainstream now than it was, but it's not 10 years ago, it wasn't mainstream, right? But the assumption is like, well, it's this old, and we know that because they couldn't have modeled what the sky would look like at some other time. It had to have been what it looked like right then, so that's why we can date, you know what I mean? I'm like, well, wait. Like, why can't we assume that they could, at any time, build it so that it would look like some other time?
Right.
Like we could. We could model the sky and be like, well, this is what it will look like 12,000 years from now, so let's build it like that.
Yeah.
You know, and that would really confuse somebody because you're like, well, this is from 2,000 years in the future. Right? Because, like, what I'm saying is, like, they're not necessarily dating their construction. They're pointing to a time.
Yeah, it could be. Absolutely.
So... all of the stuff in Giza seems to point to this time. That doesn't mean that that's when it was built, is what I'm saying, I guess, to me. I don't see that. I don't follow the correlation there. I agree that it could be that. I do not say that that's what it is. Like, I think
only
the Egyptians
problem with
could
that is that when you incorporate a natural feature like a river that you know is going to move in thousands of years, then it wouldn't make sense. Like how do you say, well, the river in so many thousands of years will be right here? So you can't.
No. I think that, well, and they didn't know that it wouldn't be there now either. But we can see that it was there. So like, as long as it used to be there at some point, you know, like, okay, so like right now I could say, well, I want to pinpoint this particular period. Let's use this river right here as the Milky Way. And then we'll figure out where the stars are going to be, given that that's the Milky Way, right? And then we'll build our buildings. Well, the river may disappear in 2,000 years, but its signs will still be there. The buildings will be there. And you'll be like, okay. And you'll be able to see the time that I was pointing at. You see what I'm saying? So
but that's what I'm saying. Like if you're pointing at a time in the past and the river is no longer there, you'd have to like just say, well, we dig underground and we know that the river used to be here. So but how do you know when? You know, I guess you could figure out when it was there.
Who? How does who know when? What?
So the fact that the Orion correlation has the river in this particular spot that lines up, like
that's where you have to start with, yeah.
Right. So if the river wasn't there when they started to build it.
Oh no, I'm saying that it was. I'm saying the river was there, but that's what you start with. They didn't know it was going to move. You know, their probably assumption was it'll probably going to be around here.
So if the river's there, then they're pinpointing the time that they're in.
No, I'm saying that the river could have been there for a long fucking time. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't know how long the river was there, you know? Like, it was there. It could have been there for a long time. They could have done it much after this period or way before it. As long as the river was there, you're okay. We know that it moved at some point, but it was there also for a long time. So I'm saying, like, if the river was there 4,000 years before the time they wanted to point to, they still could have done it, pointing to this time. Or 2,000 years after the time they wanted to point to. As long as
that's
the river...
my point. How would they know that the river was there if they're pointing to a time in the past?
Oh, well, they don't have to, because the river's there now. Like, you know, they're saying, like, let's look at the correlate. What would the sky look like in the time we're trying to point at? Right? And it's like, the river is going to be the Milky Way. Well, if the river wasn't there at the time they're pointing at, that doesn't matter as much, I don't think.
But if you were to date it, right, like say using diatoms or some shit like that,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, it all lines up, it all correlates to like 10,000, except the river wasn't there.
Right. So then you would have to assume that they weren't butt flappers and they could project you know what I mean? Like that the river was used as a symbol. And since they can't know in the future that the river will arrive, it must have been there when they did it. But it may not have been there when they're at the time that they're pointing at. But that doesn't matter. It's still there as the.
But is that the case? Like,
no, I don't know. I'm just saying that. Like, what I'm trying to say is I don't follow the correlation that like they must have built what the sky looked like at the time. I'm saying that they. To me, I don't see what the problem is with them modeling some future or past time.
Yeah, I agree with that. My point was that like it would be harder to do that with a natural feature because you don't know if the natural feature is going to be there, and if you're pointing to a time in the future or if you're pointing to a time in the past.
Well, the buildings that you're building weren't there either, so that doesn't matter to me, I guess. You're painting a picture of something that happened in the past. The picture wasn't there at the time of the thing you're painting. You see what I'm saying? Like, you build buildings 2,000 years after the fact. Those weren't there either during. Right. So it doesn't matter that the river wasn't there. It's here now, and the buildings are here now, and you're painting the picture of what it used to look like back then. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I thought. Maybe that's totally wrong. Because like what I'm saying is you paint the picture on the ground, and then you say, when did the sky look like this? It doesn't matter if the
right.
You know.
So what I thought was the case was that they know when the Nile was in that position.
Who? The modern?
Like modern times.
Okay.
Like we know when it was over here and when it was not.
Yeah. They think. I don't know.
I don't know either. Maybe they don't.
I mean, like sometimes they're dating us like millions and millions of years ago it was over here. I'm like, I don't know. You know, I'm not sure about that.
But yeah, I see your point. It's totally possible.
Like, what do you think about the whole magnetic reversals? They think that they happen 700,000 years apart. I'm like, how do you know? Like, what? How do you know that? Like
based on some like the magnetic alignments in crystal form.
Right, and how far apart they think that those must be, right? So you got this.
Yeah, using stratigraphy and all that.
Yeah, you've got the rock on the bottom of the ocean, like because it's coming out of those mid-ocean ridges, and
can't they do that with ice cores too? Tell what the
check magnet. Well, no, because it has to solidify into something that won't change. You know what I mean? Like in other words, the little iron parts in any lava rock or any magma
or water. Like there can be iron in the water. But I don't know. I don't
know how stable that is.
We don't have a show observer for this half of the show, so we can't find out for sure.
My assumption would be that like if it was in ice, it could move. It would be too easy for it to move.
Oh yeah, okay.
But once it's locked into some crystalline matrix, it's not going to change, even if the whole magnetic field does. Right. And that's the assumption. So they say, so that the mid-Atlantic ridge is constantly making new ocean floor. So it comes out of it, and there are these bands there where this one's the magnetic alignment's this way, and the next band it's that way, and the next band is this way, right? So that's So they look at that, and they say, well, based on all this pre-assumed like stacks of assumptions, this is how long it would take for the Earth to make this amount of floor from that. They don't know any of that shit, really. Those are based on assumptions. So like this is 700,000 years, this is 600.
Well, they're measuring it. They're using a very short time period of measuring, and then saying all of history was it was moving the same speed.
Right. If we know if there's a cataclysmic period and everything, the whole Earth is sort of shaking and trembling and stuff, and there's more volcanic, it's going to be making that shit faster.
Right.
But yeah, so there's a possibility that these magnetic reversals happen a lot more frequently than every 600,000 or 700,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the sun does it every 11, and it's enormous.
Yep.
But and I've tried to look into this. Like, there's something about the physics of a spinning sphere that is full of a liquid, which you could assume is a liquid. Right? If you have think of a glass ball filled with some sort of liquid, okay, and then you spin that glass ball. There's weird fluid dynamic shit that happens where the entire contents of the thing will flip over. The liquid contents will flip over inside this spinning sphere, right? And it's very regular, like a clock. But it's based on this crazy fluid dynamics shit that I don't understand.
So one weird thing, just like throwing this out there, if you have like a water bottle, say like a nice cylindrical clear bottle full of water, and you're holding it in your hand, and you just flip your hand back and forth like you're doing a pole shift.
Okay.
Flip it one way, flip it back the other way. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you do it fast, the water will all start to spin in the same direction.
Oh, yeah.
So like
Is that a coreless force thing?
I don't know. It's like, it's weird. Like I noticed that like when I was trying to shake up, mixing something or whatever, like I would you can try to like rotate it in your hand or whatever to get the water to go, and it's hard to get it to like get real fast. But if you just hold it steady and just flip it over, pole to pole, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth,
It'll start spinning.
the water spins in one direction and just starts hauling ass. So then I realized like that's how I'm gonna shake paint cans from now on. Like no more up and down shaking.
Yeah.
You just flip it over and it just freaking turns it into a
That's cool.
freaking vortex in there.
See, folks, using science.
So we got a spinning globe, and there's this idea of the magnetic pole shifts, and I wonder if it's like the same.
Oh.
There's some correlation there. I don't know. So like can you do it the other way around?
Can you? Okay, so because you're saying if you flop it back and forth, it starts this rotation. If you get the rotation going, will it flop back and forth?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, that seems like it should be the case.
Like if you, so
the reason it's hard to visualize is because you have to. What are you? Like you can flop it back and forth because you can hold it doing that, but you can't spin something and hold it.
Yeah, I know.
You have to give it an axis to hold, and then you're holding the axis so it
And
can't
then you
move
have
over.
to be in 0G, right? And you get it spinning fast enough, will it start to rotate?
Yeah, I mean the sun does it. That's what I'm saying. Like the sun's magnetic field completely reverses every 11 years. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's basically a giant ball of liquid stuff, plasma, right? It's a fluid of a type, and it has a lot more mass than us.
It could be hollow.
It takes 25 days for it to rotate once. It could be hollow, right? A hollow sun. I go with the flat sun theory. I'm a flat sunner. I'm part of the Flat Mars Society.
Sorry, finish your point.
Okay, so if the sun, which has a lot more mass than us, and it takes 25 days for it to do one of its day rotations, like one rotation around its axis.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty slow. You know, it's rotating slow.
Yeah.
One of its days is 25 of ours, so that's, you know, but it's a huge body.
Yeah.
So actually, it's probably going really fast, like relatively. If you kind of did if you got rid of the relative, if you like sort of made the relative masses irrelevant and saw what the real numbers were, you know, the comparable numbers, like where you basically make the Earth's rotational energy comparable to the sun's by getting the masses of them out of the equation. That would massively increase the sun's rotational energy and massively decrease the Earth's one, or you know, show them proportionally, right, relative to the mass. The sun's probably its rotational energy is enormous, relative to the Earth's, right. So every 11 years, its entire magnetic system, which is like fucking way more powerful than the Earth, it's incredibly powerful. It encompasses the entire solar system, right? The sun's magnetosphere goes all the way out way past Pluto. It's the Voyager satellites just went through it. The helio sheath is what they call it. Where the place where the solar flux coming from the sun is now equal to the incoming interstellar flux, and everything equals out, and so it makes this sheath, this globe around the entire solar system that's sort of teardrop shaped because we're moving. Right.
That's bad.
And it's the same. So the Earth has the same deal. Our magnetosphere is this teardrop shape because we're moving through the sun's stuff, and so at the front edge, it's compressed really close to the atmosphere, but it trails this long teardrop shape for the other side because it's being battered all the time by the sun. Well, the helio sheet of the sun is the same way.
So the teardrop, like the long part of the teardrop's always pointing away from the sun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right. It's like a comet. The comet's tail is always pointing away from the sun.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with its direction of travel.
Right.
It has everything to do with the ball of fire in the middle of the solar system.
Yeah.
So the sun's magnetosphere, based on its magnetic
Polarity.
its polarity, it's incredibly strong. It's really powerful. It can be felt all the way out to, you know, it's got the fucking sheath wall out past Pluto. That's a big fucking magnetic field. And it's fighting off the interstellar flux, which is every other star in the galaxy is pushing on it, right?
Yeah.
And we're going through the local bubble, which is an ancient supernova. So all that shit's pushing on it too, right? So it's a powerful deal. And it completely flips 180 degrees every 11 years. That's enormous. I've been wondering, like, who do I know that can sit down and figure out what that means energetically? Like, okay, take this enormous magnetic field that where we can sort of maybe we can kind of get ideas of how powerful it is based on things that we know that it does, and then tell me what it means to turn it completely over every 11 years. Like, what is that? What is going on here? How much energy is that? I think the numbers would be enormous, which implies that whatever's happening must be some fundamental physical thing. Like, in other words, that a liquid inside of a sphere that's spinning will completely rotate. It will flop all the way over, based on some sort of weird fucking physics shit that's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's some strange thing happening here that makes this happen.
Yeah.
That makes it like where it not doing this would be really hard rather than
Right. Path of least resistance.
yeah. And it has to do with like liquids in a but in a confined spherical shape that's spinning around an axis. I've seen that where people are doing experiments and they got there was a Nova documentary about this where the guy was looking into pole shifts, the magnetic pole shifts, and him and his students built this thing where they were like, okay, so we have these magnetic fluids, and they put it in a sphere, and they would get this thing going, like spinning it really fast, right? They're trying to approach like planetary energy levels of rotation using this thing, and he was like, this fluid starts to flip-flop really quickly in this small ball, you know, and they get it high, and it's like, and they had this way of measuring it because of they used immiscible liquids, so it was like the top half is filled with a lighter immiscible from the bottom, so that they could tell when it's flipping over.
Yeah.
Right? And they gave each one different radioactivity so that they could see it through the sphere because it was they were using something
Enclosed,
yeah. And so they were showing these images where you basically see these two different glowing half spherical shapes or whatever, and then like one would start to curl around the side based on the rotation going like this way. It would start to curl around the side, and then it would start trying to, and they would, you know,
Yeah.
and it was like the same thing. It would do this yin yang thing where one was reaching around the edge of the other one, and then they would just flop suddenly.
That's cool.
Based on the spinning, I was like, okay,
I was thinking that Wall Thornhill might have an answer or an idea about that because, you know, looking at just from what I've been able to sort of grasp about the electric universe idea, if the whole, like, the fact that the sun is the sun, like that it's lit up and burning like a star,
it's external.
right? It's being charged
Yeah.
by by this plasma stream that's coming through.
Yeah, it's in a cosmic
Part of
string of
our-
Christmas lights.
That's right. that there's some resonance in the plasma stream itself that is causing that.
Yeah.
That
Oh, okay, I got you.
that
Yeah.
oscillation. Basically, it's alternating current. So that 11 years is the frequency of the alternating
Wow.
current of the plasma stream.
That's really slow.
Right. It's a freaking huge resonant frequency, like just massive.
Yeah, this current alternates once every 11 years. But it travels light years.
Right.
As long as it alternates at some point, it'll go really far. If it's DC, it's not going to go really far. That's crazy to think of it that, like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't do that, because I try to look at everything in the universe like these really, even these incredibly slow things. I'm like, no, this is like, if you back out of everything, it's actually pulsing really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sun's like,
Yeah.
and that's part of some greater resonance.
Yeah.
Of some bigger system. Yeah, okay, so this is what pulsars are doing.
Right.
A pulsar is a neutron star that's pulsing sometimes thousands of times a second, but that's because a neutron star, well, I don't know what the electric universe people think neutron stars are. I know that they think the gravity stuff is all bullshit. They're like, they're not incredibly dense, fucking tiny, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying hollow sun, because it's
Yeah.
like really, it's that there is some body there. There's some, cosmic body.
Right.
But it could be like the size of Saturn or whatever.
Right, but
But it's being it's just being like electrified basically by
Right.
by the plasma stream.
yeah, so, okay, yeah, I guess, okay, let's see. Because the idea of a neutron star's mass is based on what they think the star's mass was, and if that's wrong, then the neutron star could still have all of its same properties and just not be that heavy.
Right.
It would still do everything that a neutron star does, I guess. I think. Because the idea is like, like a...
I'm sure he's got some stuff on him. Like there was one of the things I was listening to was it
Yeah, I've
was
heard him talk
actually
about
one of his lectures on stars, like the formation of stars and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, I've specifically heard him talk about black holes and neutron stars, and that it's ludicrous. The ideas of these infinite gravity gradients and shit like
Yeah.
that. He's just like, this is ludicrous. I'm like, okay. But he doesn't.
just absolutely
He's never explained it
ludicrous.
directly. Really, but I don't blame him for that. Some of that shit you can't drill down into without half the people falling asleep. Because it turns into a physics lecture, and they're like, he's got good.
And I'm
at-
like, give me more.
yeah, no, I'm like, wait, why? But if you were actually there and you asked that, half the people in the room would be like, oh my god, there's this guy. Wait, what are. But there's the idea of like, everybody's seen figure skaters. The girl starts to twirl and her arms are out, and when she pulls them in, she goes
Yeah.
and starts spinning. That's the idea. Like, the star goes nova, the core collapses on itself from its own gravity, blows all the exterior shit off, and then you end up with this ball that's like 11 miles across that used to be this enormous star, right? It's most of the mass of the star, but it's only 11 miles across now. That enormous star took 25 days to rotate around its axis. This little 12-mile across ball is doing it millions of times a second because it became tiny, but it maintained its mass.
Right.
So now it's like...
Yeah, so
spinning.
whatever pole shift was
It's
happening,
happening fucking thousands of times a second. Yeah, so it's like... And it's a pulsar.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome to me. I love that concept.
Yeah, so it still could be an external force doing all of that. Like, so the whole idea of it going nova or whatever and blowing everything off of it is something to do with the plasma stream,
Yeah.
changing or whatever had it lit up in its previous form. Like the energy level changed or something changed and it caused
Yeah.
it to do this. And now it's basically like, I think the basic idea is like looking at the star almost like you would look at an LED, right? When we're looking at the light of an LED and we're like measuring the strobe and all this kind of stuff, you can actually say, well, this is what the electrical signal is doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. It's like we're looking at what we see is the results of some larger energy force that's causing all of these different things that we notice in different stars to happen.
Yeah, and since we understand all the intricacies of the mechanisms of an LED, we can then extrapolate based on its behavior what the underlying current is doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the way they approach it.
Right. But they're having to work out both. Like you're having to, because they don't know what the star is made of. So, you know what I'm saying? So like we know what that LED is made of and what it will do.
Yeah, exactly. But that's one of the things he talks about. He's like, they don't know all of this stuff, but like
they're making
like the way the Electric Universe guys are doing it is they're looking at what's there.
Yeah.
Like he's like he says this often. Like we just take what we can see. You know, with all of our detectors or whatever is going on.
Right. And they try to Occam's razor it without any preconceived ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that approach.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the right answer, but it's definitely a valid and worthwhile approach. Whereas the standard model is, they claim that that's what they're doing, but they're not. They have preconceived ideas, like front-loading everything before they do Occam's razor. In other words, they base Occam's razor, because Occam's razor is like what's most likely. Well, you that's an opinion, man. You know, like whatever you think is most likely is based on your opinion and your scope of knowledge. And if you have these things that you think, well, of course this is how it is, then things that point towards that are going to be the most likely things to you, because right? You have this assumption that that's what it's like. So he's trying to say, like, we try to get rid of all that. We're aware that we have these a priori ideas, and we're like, okay, how can we best get rid of all these things, and then look at it and say, what could be happening, and then they build a model, and I think that's good. Yeah.
And that pretty much like starts from the whole redshift problem too. You know, like that we talked about a while back. Like
we're like, wait, you don't know how far away that is because you don't know how big. How are you checking how big it is? Oh, because you have these assumptions about gravity and because you have this other. Oh, okay. Well, you're wrong. Most likely.
Yeah.
Based on my preconceived ideas of everything I've seen about the standard model, you're probably wrong. But yeah, so why is this that okay, why was the concept of the Earth magnetic reversal so like, I mean, until very recently when they got this information about the magnetic shifts found in the stone all on the sea bottom, they were like, that doesn't happen. The Earth's magnetic field doesn't reverse. That's ridiculous. The sun's does it. I'm like, well, the sun's does it. Neutron stars are like, the pulsars are doing it all, and I'm like, why is it that Earth can't do it? Why was that ridiculous? Is it because it's scary?
Yeah, I don't know. I think uniformitarianism, right? Like
they don't like it because it's cataclysmic, and it could be,
Yeah.
I mean, the idea, like, there's been, because if you look at the fluid dynamics models, that there's a period during the shift itself where there is no magnetosphere of the Earth. It completely collapses below the surface. Right now, since our magnetic field is somewhat stable, it is the sphere is actually projected out just above into the upper atmosphere layers, right,
which is protecting us from all kinds of
but the aurora
stuff.
We get the aurora because the sun side of the magnetosphere is pushed into the atmosphere by the pressure, and then we get these aurora shows, right? But if it became unstable and started to try to flip around, it would actually collapse. The sphere itself would collapse below the surface of the Earth.
Yeah.
And then we would be outside of the shield, and everything on the surface of the Earth would be getting hit by hard space radiation from the sun. Like,
so if you were if it was at night when it happened, would you be okay? And then if it came back, if it like went back above the surface before you rotated around facing the sun, would you be all right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, this.
It would do a lot of fucked up shit to lots of molecules in the atmosphere, which would then have secondary radiation.
Okay, yeah.
But that is not like, it's alpha radiation that's incredibly deadly, and I'm not even suggesting that this is deadly. Like, it may be that it turns all our space genes on. Like, you go to space and your space genes turn on. Well, maybe these periods of rotation or the magnetic field
I'm
going
gonna
away.
punch you in the space genes.
Yeah, just punch you in the jeans. Space jeans.
I want to get myself a pair of space jeans.
Got in the rocket and activated my space genes. Yeah. But like, if we
Put rivets in the divots with my physical arm. Divots in the rivets.
divots
my
in the
bad.
rivets, putting divots in the rivets with my physical arms. I want to punch you in your jeans.
Sorry about that.
That was a tangent. It's worthwhile though.
We totally skipped the last break.
That's all right.
I know.
I saw that. Like,
I saw it was happening.
Yeah.
And I let it happen.
just kept letting it happen. Yeah, but I mean, if just going up to space and basically getting outside of the magnetosphere right now turns on space genes, then if the magnetosphere collapses below the surface for a decade before it begins to sort of stabilize and reform, everything's space genes get turned on. Well, anything that has space genes they get turned on, and maybe there's this period of. I thought it would be a period of wild magic is what I thought of it as, like where everything's in flux. Like you walk into a forest and it's not going to be the same forest as it was yesterday because everything's fucking changing all the time, very rapidly, because you're in this wild magic period, right, where the stability sphere is gone and now everything is being bombarded by the creative energies of, so stuff's just changing. You walk into the forest and there's new monsters every time you go in there.
Oh,
Shit that
man.
you've never fucking seen before,
And you turn into a new monster.
That's right.
too.
You're also a new monster every day. 'Cause, you're like, what is this?
So do they think
Third arm
is that kind of like what the standard model idea is, that
That's
like
my idea.
when it shuts off, it's going to be or below the surface for that long of a time?
I've never
10 years. Or,
I've never heard any standard model say this, but I have heard geophysicists say that. But it's hard to tell because of their uniformitarian.
That's what I
bullshit.
was saying. Like they're already looking at the stratigraphy.
They
and
think that it takes thousands of years. I'm suggesting decade
okay.
because they say thousands. Right? They're like, it only happens every 600,000 or 700,000 years, and it takes thousands of years to take place. It isn't cataclysmic. And I'm like, so it probably happens every 10,000 years, and it takes a couple of years to happen. And it is cataclysmic. Right? But they do say that there's a massive weakening of the field, right? And
But like you gotta so if this idea that, with Velikovsky and all this stuff, Saturn being the sun and then just shutting off one day, and then whatever planet the sun is,
solar
lighting up, solar regime change. Like there had to have been insane stuff going on with our magnetosphere.
We're supposedly orbiting Saturn. Like we're a moon of Saturn. Is that idea?
Yeah.
Which is why if you look at the most ancient,
Like the whole solar system rearranged itself
Yeah.
after Saturn went out.
right? Yeah,
And the sun lit up, like everything just kind of moved. And so Walt Thornhill's saying it happens so rapidly, it doesn't, because if you use the standard model of gravity, he's saying that force is not strong enough. Like the electric force is like way,
and it's polarized, so
more
it can
powerful.
equal things out. He points
It
out
can
that
push and pull.
right, which allows it to sort of put systems into stable places, whereas something that can only pull is gonna have a hard time building a stable system because all it can do is pull, right? And so he pointed this out. Like there's nothing in a gravitic solar system that is anchoring the planets into their orbits. Like if there's just a pull, if something changes that pull just a tiny bit, everything goes haywire. It gets worse and worse and worse. You can't fix it with just a pull. You got to be able to push on it too, right? I thought that was a great
So there was something like some huge comet or something went past Jupiter.
Yeah.
And it changed Jupiter's orbit. Very slightly, like they measured it.
Yeah. And like the massive,
But it's still stable.
right. Like the massive earthquake in Japan that happened that caused the big tsunami, like 2010 or whatever. That actually changed the Earth's rotation time measurably. Like it was something like 1/10 millionth of a second. Like the rotational period of the Earth was changed 1/10 millionth of a second, which is a measurable amount from one earthquake in Japan.
Yeah, that's insane. So there has to be a balance there. Like
something has to be.
It makes sense to have both the push and pull, because
the polarized
otherwise,
force.
like a comet flies through, and then it just destabilizes the entire solar system,
Right.
and everything crashes. It's like
I mean, one of my earliest ideas of what the primordial dragon is a very ancient dark star passing nearby the solar system. That would just throw everything into chaos, right?
Yeah.
You have some enormously massive, heavy body that's dark, right? Like, so think of a neutron star that it's called a naked neutron star or naked singularity. It's no longer spinning. It's incredibly ancient, so it's cold. Okay, can't fucking see it.
Yeah.
It's not
I
emanating.
like to look at pictures of naked singularities.
Yeah, the curves of everything behind them coming through. Yeah. You can't actually see them, but the curves they cause on everything around behind them. Yes, titillating. So like you can't see it. You would have to be looking for lensing, like you'd have to be seeing these weird stars doing weird shit. That's the only thing. That would be the only giveaway. And if it passed just kind of close by the solar system, they would destroy it. It doesn't even have to come that close. It could be if it came between us and Alpha Proxima, the closest star. If it was 2 light years away, every planet would be flung out into space. And the sun would wrap around it and fling off in some other direction. It would completely pull it. But if there's a push and a pull and everything's being held together by sort of electromagnetism, then that wouldn't happen. It would cause a lot of chaos.
It would rearrange some stuff.
Yeah, it would cause a lot of chaos.
Gone, things would rearrange again.
Yeah, the whatever plasma arc is feeding the sun would probably wrap around this thing and it would do weird shit.
Or there is a plasma arc making it move over here to begin with.
Yeah. Or it's not actually any mass. It's just a product of some plasma arc.
Yeah. Because that's the thing that's really mind blowing about the whole. It's like you just have to deconstruct the whole standard model with all of those things.
Well, yeah. So we know from observational data that the things that we call black holes and the things that we call neutron stars are real objects that do these things that they are doing. The standard modelists have built their image of what is making them do those things.
Yeah.
And the electric universe guys aren't saying that black holes aren't real or that neutron stars aren't real or pulsars aren't real. They're just saying that the mechanisms underlying those things are not what the standard modelists are saying. But all the same things are happening. Just like with the elastic universe. Like, we're not saying that gravity isn't happening.
Right.
We're saying that it totally is happening just like we see it, but the underlying mechanism is this instead of this, and it still works the same. The end result. Yeah, so if because like if you could take the things that cause quasars, the incredible whatever's happening there at the accretion disk, right? The quasar, you got this accretion disk around what they view as a black hole, so it's got all this gravity. The accretion disk is a bunch of material that's been crushed into a disk rotating around it, right? That its inner edge stops at the event horizon.
Yeah.
Anything falling into the event horizon gets total converted. It's total conversion. It gets ripped apart on the quantum level, and all this energy comes out of it. And so you have these two enormous jets of
out of the poles. Yeah.
That's a cool model to me, but they're saying basically that you could have these same if this is a nexus of electromagnetic energy, the same thing can be happening.
Yeah.
But it's being caused by electricity, and it isn't gravity doing all this weird shit. I could see that too, but what does that do to the magnetic fields of all this other shit? This is the part I don't understand. Like, how are they getting gravity from that force? I don't understand it. Like, how are they turning magnetism into what we see as gravity? That's the part I don't get. Are they still saying that gravity exists? It's just not. It isn't running the universe like they say it is, like the standard model is.
I remember him saying.
Like, what is holding us down onto this planet? I'm not magnetic.
Well, I'm not you are. Like every quantum particle, every everything that you're built of is magnetic. Like everything. The magnetic field.
But all of my magnetic stuff is polarized. Like equal. Like an atom is made of a bunch of magnetic negative and positive things, and they equal out to zero. Right. That's why they're a contained system. Right, and then you can kind of build those into molecules, but they don't have an overall overt magnetic effect on everything around them. And you have to put them into crystalline structures, and then shit starts to flow, and that's when you get magnetics.
Yeah.
So like,
you're talking about
So I'm not magnetic to where I'll stick to something, right? That's what I mean.
Yeah, but you're magnetic to the point that you can't go through the floor.
Right. That's right. So Are you saying that that's how that's what you think they're saying it works? Like whatever this flux that is happening is pushing me down onto the planet because it's interacting with my inability to go through solid objects? Like, is that what you mean?
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't fully understand it either. I'm still trying to.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
But also he said something like, made this claim that like this force that we call gravity, being like it's on the fundamental level it's electrical, right? But
what does that mean?
Yeah. But I'm just gonna throw this out there. He's saying that it travels like 10 billion times the speed of light or something.
Yeah. It has to because
effectively being instantaneous.
Yeah. Did we not talk about this? I thought.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah,
because you have these massive systems and
they're interacting now. Like
right.
That's the galaxy over here is reacting gravitically to where the fucking massive black hole in this other galaxy is now, not where it would be if it was like waiting for light speed for that shit to get there.
Right.
They're interacting instantaneously, so gravity must move faster than the speed of light, way faster. Like that's why I was suggesting that.
That's why I'm saying like I'm not really sure how the idea of the electric force thing. Yeah, I think they're talking about neutrinos and all that kind of stuff.
Neutrinos may be a form of tachyon.
Get out of here, neutrinos.
That's right.
Neutrino just got it.
Finally to faster than light neutrinos around here. Neutrino walks into a bar. Come on, it's a great joke. No nerds around here, people. All right. I think that's going to be it for this episode 48.
Rambling 48.
That's right, 48. Just take 4 times 2 equals 8. There's something there. I don't know. It's symmetry. Okay. Some changes. If you guys want to go to the website, it is now just brothersoftheserpent.com. We'll take you directly to the blog.
Hell yeah.
We are official owners of Snakesite. I was like, should I get Snake Bros? Snake Bros? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to buy all this later, sometime. But the other thing I did was I went to get the Creative Commons license attribution. Okay, so I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like Creative Commons 4.0 international licensing non-something, which basically means don't change it, don't sell it, but share it with whoever you want. Okay, so we're now licensed under that Creative Commons licensing. So. Because the only, you can add all rights reserved, but that means like you can't share it, you can't do anything with that. People technically are not supposed to share it.
Yeah.
So, and I had that on there because I was like, we need to say this is ours somehow. But anyway, I went to get the Creative Commons and I did that this week, so it's now under Creative Commons 4. And it's at the bottom. If you scroll to the very bottom of the front page of the blog, you'll see it, and it links you to the licensing information.
Oh yeah.
But basically, it means don't change it, don't sell it, but share it with whoever you want for free as much as you want. So we still have brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Haven't changed that yet. I was offered an email address with brothersoftheserpent.com, but not yet. Too much money. Shit ain't free, and this is free. So right now the podcast is free. It's never going to be not free, but anyway. I think that's it. Those are the main changes I had. Do you have anything?
Change my hair, dude.
I don't know. I've got a logo in the works, like a real logo that I've actually drawn, not something that I stole from the internet. I'm gonna finish it soon, I promise, and I'll put it up there. The Mind the Hive guys have been getting on me like, dude, where's your fucking logo? We can't put you on our site without your logo. I'm like, yeah, I know. So I'm gonna do that. I just need to sit down and draw it. But whatever.
You just need to make it.
I just need to build it in 4D. Yeah, something. I think that's it. Did I have a clever? I was trying to think if I had a weird question posed. No, I don't have one. I want to do that. At the end of each show now, I'm going to come up with some weird question to ask you. Like, what is this? What's going on here?
Oh man,
you got one?
No.
Oh, okay.
You just nailed yourself.
Yeah, I outed myself without having one. That's great, Russ. Here's the question to ponder. Why did Russ do that? Figure that one out.
Thanks for listening, folks.
That's right. Thank you very much.
GFY.
GFY cat.
Snake Rose.
Snake Rose.
Hello. Journey well. Greetings.
Exile?